The MC is a barbarian named Ketal. After years of being forced to complete quests, he is finally released from the ice wall, which kept him confined in this demonic hell called Snowfield with SSS-ranked monsters, some of which aren't even discovered by humanity, but to Ketal, they are just one-punch opponents after battling them over so many years. However, lacking any knowledge of the outside world, he decides to meet up with the very first civilization he could sense. But, even though he didn't wish to, he ended up destroying their settlement, and more importantly, it was a village of elves led by a thick elf mommy. At first, Ketal thought she would listen to him before attacking, but she turned out to be even more barbaric than barbarians themselves and attacked him with super strong arrows and a fierce fire spirit, which ended up pissing him off. Now, Ketal in past life used to be a Japanese employed man who wished to go to a fantasy world of wonder and magic one day. He even quit his job just to travel around the world and experience extreme achievements, such as climbing the tallest mountain on Earth, visit the place closest to Earth's core, travel to southernmost point of the planet. But even so, it didn't satisfy him because it was not even close to the fantasy world he wanted to see. Every night he deeply prayed to God to send him off to another world, and one day his prayer was answered, and Ketal was sent to the center of a place called White Snowfield. He found himself surrounded by extremely dangerous monsters, such as white serpents capable of devouring glaciers, gray bears that could cause earthquakes, and ferocious rats comparable to monsters. However, once there came a time when an emperor, who embarked on his journey to conquer White Snowfield, returned as sole survivor, and he declared the most dangerous thing out there that hell wasn't monsters, but something else that resided there. In this White Snowfield, Ketal met two other barbarians who were strong enough to survive this place, but unlike him, they didn't seem to have much brains, actually any at all. He was tired of hanging around those dumb guys who only knew killing and eating. Ketal always tries to knock some sense into them not to eat whatever they come across, but they ignore it, leading him to be pissed off. But for them, ignorance is a bliss, and it leads one of those two barbarians, Greta, to cough out fog and die. The other one tried to wake him up, but it was no use. Ketal knew it, so he looked away, feeling an urgency to leave this place as soon as possible. One day, a carriage guarded by some mercenaries arrived in this freezing hell. They clearly weren't accustomed to this place, and some even warned their captain this trip is not far from suicide. However, the blonde captain of those mercenaries shut down the complaints, since all of them agreed to this before coming here for the reward. They couldn't deny that, but they didn't expect it to be this bad, either with just a cold. Within the carriage, the one who hired these mercenaries was sitting in wait. This girl's name is Milena, from the House of Akasha. She could hear the mercenaries outside complaining about the cold, but instead of taking it rudely, Milena respects they came here for guard duty despite knowing how dangerous White Snowfield is. She wanted to give them a break, considering they're literally shivering at every step. But her butler turned down the idea, warning her they can't let their guard down, knowing what exists out there. She knows monsters were just the starting, and according to the stories of an emperor who once sought to conquer the White Snowfield, he entered with all the strong fighters and soldiers he could find, and a few years later, his entire empire collapsed due to lack of its ruler. That emperor was presumed to be lost, but one day, after years, he returned alive but alone from the White Snowfield. He looked decades older and spoke like an unhinged man, that in White Snowfield, there are truly ferocious monsters. But the most dangerous thing wasn't a monster, but the barbarian that resides in there. The sight of bloodbath he witnessed was not far from hell, from which no one could escape from. The butler claims it's just a legend, but Milena confirmed the other things claimed by that emperor were later on proved to be true, but that still leaves anyone who claimed to have seen that barbarian. She's aware of that, but still they can't rule out the possibility just because no one ever saw it. Suddenly, the mercenaries in front stopped and reported something up ahead, and upon closer look, it seemed to be a person. Once the captain confirmed the human-like shape, he quickly informed everyone they got good news and bad news. The good news is whatever that thing out there is small, but the bad news is it's coming right towards them. The news shook everyone's heart, and they all focused in one direction, mercenaries grabbing their weapons for possible danger. The captain confirmed it's a human, with gray hair, scars on chest and coat made of monster's fur, and the glare from that human kept everyone on their toes. All of them could see it was a barbarian, and while they contemplated what to do now, the barbarian came out clear he was on just a stroll, since he was bored from sight of other barbarians. Although he didn't expect to run into outsiders, The barbarian smirked and claimed it's his pleasure to meet them, and he's undoubtedly the Ashton barbarian of legend, Catal. Catal noticed the large storage wagons behind the humans and thought of them as traitors, and the fact they seem to be guarding the caravan behind them means the ones in front are mercenaries. He doesn't think they'll go back even if he suggests, hearing which alarmed the mercenaries' captain, but he was too scared from the huge build of Catal. Catal decided to just talk straight to their employer in the wagon, and Milena, who heard him, wonders now what. The mercenary captain is scared as if his instincts are screaming at him to run, but they hear something unexpected next, as the barbarian expresses his wish to be hired as well. It caught everyone by surprise. Catal thought they didn't hear him clearly, so he repeated in detail what he's offering is to help them cross the snowfield under his protection. It doesn't make sense to Captain. Why would a legendary barbarian ask for work? Could he have some ulterior motives? Or he's really not hostile towards them? Catal mentions if he was hostile, all of them would be dead already. They can't seem to deny that. Then Captain looks Catal in the eye and approaches Milena, asking if she heard all that. Milena affirms she did. Then Captain asks her if she'll really choose to hire that barbarian. She asked him just in case. What would happen if they fight him? The captain didn't take long to answer such an obvious question. He wouldn't dare recommend it against that beast. Milena basically has no other choice. Thus she accepts the request to hire Catal. Captain goes and informs Catal his hire request was accepted, hearing which he smiled, claiming it was wonderful news. We know for who. Mercenaries were terrified just by having stood beside Catal, and the very first act of his raised suspicions as he approached towards the back, claiming he was free to speak to his employer. The captain warned him if he tried anything funny, but Catal finished the rest of the sentence for the captain to be warned instead. Catal couldn't be stopped by anyone even if they wanted to, and seeing him go just like that made others question the captain if it's okay. Captain mentions their employer expected it already and approved it beforehand. Someone suggested even so, they should stop him since he looks suspicious, but Captain makes it clear to everyone they can't even think of stopping him. Even the idea itself is a joke when they consider the legend of Ashton Barbarian. Catal just opened the door of the carriage and pushed Butler to the side so he could sit. Milena didn't dare refuse him, even though they're not sure what Catal has in mind. Catal remained quiet for a minute to let them calm down and make it clear he didn't have any hostility for them. Butler didn't believe him at all, but like he could spell it out, while Milena herself was silently looking at the legendary barbarian in front of her. After sharing greetings, Catal was intrigued by warmth inside this carriage compared to the chilly, freezing temperatures outside. When he heard it's handled by magic, Catal was excited like a baby. He warned her, though, she got very low chances of passing through this place with those mercenaries. Thus he'll protect them himself. However, there's one condition. Milena worried what condition he would possibly have, but they worried for naught, as his condition was simple, to give him knowledge from the world outside the snowfield. He just wanted the knowledge, which didn't seem like a condition at all to Milena, but it was satisfying enough for Catal, and since she knew there's no other choice, she agreed with his condition, and the deal was sealed. Next he asked for her name, and she introduced herself properly as Milena of Akasha family. Catal did the same in return, and they continued their abnormal journey. Back when Catal arrived in this world, before he could figure things out for himself, he had to deal with terrible cold and endlessly strong monsters, followed by him having to even lead a barbarian tribe. He couldn't even guess how many years had passed since he arrived here, and whenever he tried to walk out the border of this freezing hell, he was stopped by a mysterious wall asking him to complete all the given quests first. There was once a time when he almost gave up, but right then he saw some people coming in from outside, which sparked some hope in him that the outside world was exactly the fantasy and magic world he longed for. From that on, he acted earnestly and fought monsters one after another, clearing quests to not just survive but make it out of this white snowfield. He was given more quests after each one he cleared, but he believed there must be an end to them one day. All the while, he wanted to at least get some chance to gain the information from outside the snowfield through the outsiders. However, those who came from outside either panicked upon meeting him or just pulled out their weapons on him, just like some guy who came here with an army once. Catal was grateful. This time he met a civilized person he can talk to, and compared to talking to those barbarians, it feels like a mental healing. He questions Milena, aren't they moving weapons here, which caught her by surprise, as she hasn't told him that. Catal guessed it from the sound of sharp steel from wagons, and he's curious to know if there's a war going on outside. She nodded. The Empire and Kingdom are currently at war, which makes Catal aware that the outside world might not be completely peaceful either. Milena corrects him that Father's current great empire is at fault for this war, as they selfishly want to gain more lands, while the kingdom is just doing its best to defend the borders with sword masters and heroes. Catal is more curious what kind of power they use. Milena asks him if he knows about mysticism. Catal declares he has never been outside this place. Milena tells him a little she knows that mysticism is a power in this world that only a few can sense or use, and they are then granted 5 ranks of strengths based on their mastery of mysticism, starting with 3rd rank, ones who can sense mysticism, 2nd rank consisting those who can use it, then the 1st rank containing those who can materialize it into mana or aura. Usually knights, wizards, and elementals belong to 1st rank, and beyond this rank, ranks are kind of meaningless because beings beyond this cannot have their strength measured by normal means and thus are called transcendent. These beings are capable of splitting the sky and earth with one strike, and the sword masters belong to this rank. Lastly comes the hero, whose powers go even beyond, making them legendary existences. She states even a 3rd rank person is considered strong in a small territory. Catal expresses his wish to meet them one day, which catches her by surprise, while Catal is just curious, since all he knows right now is this snowfield he can't escape yet. The outside, the fantasy world, are what drives him daily to keep doing the quests to get out of this hell. And now that her words confirmed more exciting stuff, Catal feels he must get out. In a bit, Milena asks Catal, isn't he a barbarian, which he confirms and asks if she was aware of his existence beforehand. Milena tells him there's a legend about him, but Catal himself seems to be unaware of it. She didn't expect that and told him about the legend of that emperor who returned as sole survivor, and now that Catal thinks about it, something like that did happen, but he didn't expect it to go down like that. Catal told his side of the story that the emperor was quite a lunatic to attack him first. Catal inquired Milena, what's her reason to specifically pass through this snowfield? Milena's reason was simple, because she needs a lot of money. Her family of Akasha used to be a rich and wealthy family, but they ended up being sabotaged by their rivals, leading to a heavy debt. This expedition is to prevent the downfall of the family. Catal, being a smart enough person, understood it all, including her scheme to sell the weapons to kingdoms which are currently at war. Milena didn't expect Catal, a barbarian, to guess all that, since barbarians are known to be dumb and ignorant. Catal found it easy to get, since the Empire doesn't sound to be having any problems with supplies, which naturally inclines to Kingdom being the needy one with low supply, urging them to pay even higher prices, which makes Milena's journey through Snowfield all the more worthwhile. And since she's going through this part of Snowfield, Catal could guess her territory might share boundaries with the Empire. She agreed with his correct guess with surprise. She felt compelled to ask Catal exactly who he is, since it's hard to believe he's a barbarian. Suddenly, their carriage stopped, and Catal guessed they got some uninvited guests out there. Outside, a huge purple slimy monster has stopped their advance. The captain, Milena, recognizes this monster from rumors to be black slime. Catal learned just now what this monster is called, while Milena recalls it was recorded in Legends of Snowfield, which was written by those who returned alive from White Snowfield in the past. Among those records, black slime was the most frequently recorded one, and she wanted to know if Catal had any information on it. Catal nodded, claiming it's actually chewy and surprisingly edible, so he kind of thought of them as snacks. Milena didn't expect it to be a normal snack for him, and it grossed her out when he asked if she wanted to try one. However, now that they need to fight it, mercenaries and Milena expected Catal to do something, but my guy looked sideways, stating that he made a contract of protecting their lives, so unless he senses any real danger, he's not moving. For Catal, that black slime doesn't even qualify to be a threat, so he left others to handle it. It's also so he could assess the outside world's current level. The black slime charged at them, and the captain gave the call to the shield guy to come forward. The guy with the shield tried best to block the attack but got pushed away at some point, but he did slow down the slime a bit, so the axe guy jumped in to deal some damage to black slime, but he was slammed back without even a fight. The black slime then aimed for the blonde captain, seeing which the captain informed everyone this thing only moves in straight lines, so they need to scatter. All the mercenaries scattered around the black slime at once to launch coordinated attacks from every direction. But even though the axe guy landed a clean cut, the monster simply regenerated. Then another guy attacked from a different direction, and their captain ordered them to keep attacking without giving this monster time to regenerate and aim for the monster's core at same time. They fought the black slime for a while, and the captain finally slashed the red core, hidden in Slime's body, and finished the ordeal at once. All of them were relieved they defeated a monster of white snowfield for real, which felt like a celebratory moment for them. But Catal pitied them if this is the best they could do. After traveling further, they crossed paths with another monster, and just like before, the mercenaries fought it like a team, and with a bit of struggle, they killed the wolf monster as well. Another victory increased their morale, and they thought White Snowfield isn't as difficult as the rumors said. But the blonde captain kept his guard up and warned everyone not to let this small victory get to their heads when they haven't even reached halfway through. The guy in green hood agreed with the captain, but he also doubted if that barbarian in carriage was really strong, since if monsters of legends were only this strong, he wouldn't think that barbarians of legends would be strong either. They think he's just playing it cool without even doing anything, so at least they want some proof of his strength. Captain felt pressured by everyone's doubts, and soon enough Melina was approached by one of the mercenaries, asking her the same, a proof of that barbarian's strength. They demanded it since they are basically risking their lives out there. Melina appreciates they accepted her request when most rejected it, but when everyone raised complaints of that barbarian in back not fighting at all, she couldn't justify his special treatment herself. She glanced at the captain for some assistance, but even he didn't know how to make them listen without any solid evidence. Catal overheard them and figured if they want proof of his strength, he shall give them, but he doesn't think it's time for that yet. Others think he's just dodging it, but Catal points out they got another troublesome visitor behind them. Nobody noticed it until Catal spoke it out, and at the same time, a scary voice called out all humans here as fragile mortals with intent to turn them into its delicacy. Everyone got on their guard immediately, but it didn't seem like they could handle this speaking monster. Whereas the serpent-like monster planned on having a little fun with its prey to make the hunt more tasty. When the monster screamed, Melina and others had to cover their ears while struggling to stand on foot against the heavy pressure from the beast. But Catal remained unfazed and even ordered the beast to stop playing with his guests. Catal referred to the serpent as a mere snake. Serpent was shaken a bit when it recognized Catal, but it couldn't help but ask why he was here, since it goes against the rule of White Snowfield to not invade others' territory. Catal didn't care one bit about that, which pissed off the serpent, and the serpent declared its authority and power are not something to be underestimated, especially by a mere barbarian. The serpent attacked Catal as if it didn't want to be ordered within its own territory. Catal, being the less of talker, resorted to punches to solve the situation and landed a heavy blow to the serpent's gut. The impact from the punch shook the whole serpent's body, while excluding strong pressure in the air felt by everyone. The terrifying effect from Catal's punch couldn't be compared to anything the mercenaries and Melina witnessed till now. It was beyond comprehension already, and yet the serpent barely survived it. After Melina witnessed the kind of power Catal has, she couldn't come to ask anything else, while Catal just made a statement that he'll finish this thing quickly and made long strides towards the serpent to unleash an even more powerful punch to remove the whole beast from existence. His strength was clear as day to everyone, and after this incident, none of them could doubt his power. The mercenaries even apologized for their rudeness earlier, but Catal understands it was normal not trusting a stranger. For the rest of the journey, even Butler chose to walk instead. That just shows how much he feared Catal, while at the same time acknowledging his powers. Catal thought of something and mentioned to Melina she doesn't seem to be just a representative of her family, judging by her clothes and way of speaking, so he wonders why someone with a high position like her is personally attending this expedition. Melina is nervous, as she tells him that despite being the first daughter of her family, she isn't really respected due to being born from a concubine. Her mother was just brought for political marriage and later on got used and abandoned by her husband. She remained as a pitiful mother with no real power, and if anything, they are treated more like slaves despite sharing the same family blood. Melina didn't really intend to speak this much about her past, but that's just all the reason behind why she herself volunteered for this expedition. She knew the dangers fully well, but still chose to do it to set an example. Catal understood the whole situation and called her clever for having great ambition and being greedy for her own sake. She didn't really expect him to go so far as calling her greedy, but before she could ask anything, they heard other mercenaries making sounds of joy outside. They inform Melina they have finally reached the end of White Snowfield, and the rest of the way seems to be harmless grasslands. It means this was about time to part with Catal, and Melina thanked him for helping her. Catal asks her how she is planning on returning back to her homeland. Melina replies she'll go back through the Empire. Catal figured it makes sense, since she'll be empty-handed by then after selling the weapons. Milena nods, then questions Catal what he meant by calling her clever and ambitious. Catal defined her as really ambitious, and at the same time clever, because since her family, which used to be prestigious in the past, is suffering right now, they won't be able to deny her authority if she were to forge them a path to salvation when the family is on the brink of ruin. He's sure she aims to seize real power in the family, and she doesn't deny that. Catal could guess it, since it's a common story for a concubine's child to seize power. But Milena thinks of him as quite smart for a barbarian to have guessed all that correctly, which means he's not all brawn. She also acknowledged his power when he defeated White Serpent without a single scratch, which makes her wonder what if he were to become her force. She asks him if he wants to leave White Snowfield by any chance. If so, why don't he come with her? Catal declined her offer, claiming he still had things to do here, in which case she wanted to at least have some assurance. So she gave him a pendant, saying if he were ever to look for Akasha family when he comes outside, he can show this piece to them. Catal accepted it as a gift, and they hoped they would meet each other again one day. Catal bid farewell to them, wishing if he could also leave this snowfield like them soon. For 5 more years, Catal relentlessly completed quests given to him quietly, and after he finished the 784th quest, he finally met the conditions to be allowed to leave the White Snowfield. Catal finally took his first step towards the fantasy world he always wanted to see, and he can't explain in words how excited he is for it. Now that he's out, it's his first time witnessing the scent of fresh grass, beasts in the wild, rivers, and many more scents he could never experience in the snowfield. Catal turned back to shout at the vast snowfield that he's never coming back here again, and finally, he can explore the world he always dreamed of. He recalled the starting might not have been good and pretty horrible instead, but he still managed to survive through all that, and now he'll bear the fruit of his hardships. From magic and swords to dragons and elves, everything he could only imagine in novels and games were out there in this world, and if he didn't have that desire to see them for himself, he would have died a long time ago in White Snowfield, without a purpose. Catal looked around the whole forest and spotted some presences at some distance, hinting there's a village at that place. He was excited to finally witness a civilized town in this world, unlike those ignorant barbarians who wouldn't find it important to have a shelter. He missed human settlements, a lot more than he would have normally thanks to those headaches of barbarians, and now he wonders how he should introduce himself. He swore to act like a gentleman in this world, and with that pure intent, he walked towards the village. Meanwhile, an old man elf told everyone this place will be their new home, and all of them seemed to be very much relieved to hear that. The old man assured them that they could unpack everything and settle here, which cheered everyone up, except one elf, who out of concern questioned the elder if this place was really safe. The old man confirmed it's safe, since it's an extremely remote area where humans cannot reach. The concerned guy knew that, but he was worried since they're very close to the White Snowfield from here. The old man could understand the poor guy's concern, but he promised nothing had come out of that White Snowfield in the last 1,000 years, and if that's not enough, they have also set up a barrier as a second layer of security. This barrier was a strong type of concealment spell which completely hides their presence and makes this place look like a normal forest. And actually, they spent months designing it with help of ancient 11 magic, and if even this second layer was breached by any chance, they would still have their Majesty the Elf Queen guarding this place. So, not even monsters of the snowfield pose a threat to them as long as they have a queen on their side. However, our guy who was just walking leisurely suddenly felt like his hand bumped into something and tore it, but he couldn't see anything there. That aside, he wondered how far he still had to walk from here. Right then, he notices an elf child, lost in the forest and looking for a way, and since it was his first time seeing a real elf, Catal thought he was really lucky, and it was worth surviving for this long. Meanwhile, that elf child is pretty scared, as she wandered too far off from the village and lost her way. Suddenly, she was approached by a large being that completely covered her with just 1/4 of his shadow, greeting her with a scary, ominous, "Hello." The poor kid froze in fear and passed out on the spot. Catal immediately rushed to catch her before she fell. He didn't expect her to pass out just like that, and he still wanted to ask her about the village, but guess he'll have to bring her to the village and hold his questions inside until then. He thought it would also be counted as merit if he returned the unconscious child back to her family, making elves favorable towards him and treating him with good elven hospitality. My guy was a sucker through and through for fantasies, thus he really looked forward to this. He gently carried her in his arms and made his way back to village. But the response didn't come out as he expected, since the elves were shocked by seeing a human here, and they thought he broke through the barrier and kidnapped the poor child. As Catal kept being pressured by a barrage of questions, he could see clear things weren't going as he expected, especially when he saw the elf child's mother crying. The old man elf was too occupied with trying to figure out how a human could get here, despite the barrier. Just then, a report came in that there's a crack in the barrier, which calls for an emergency, and they need their majesty to be here. But apparently, she's in the middle of scouting the area, so no way they seem to afford calming down right now. Even when Catal tried to guarantee he's not their enemy, he only met with accusations of being a bastard who kidnapped the child, since it pretty much looked like he punched the child unconscious. The old man elf figured since their location is compromised now and the barrier also seems to be broken, it means the humans must have come fully prepared. Catal doesn't know how to ease their minds, and for starters, he guessed releasing the child would clear the misunderstanding. When the trembling child was released, she opened her eyes and heard Catal telling her to go back to her people. However, she couldn't think anything positive from the way Catal seemed in that moment. As it turns out, he's not aware how scary his smile seems to outsiders. Thanks to his pure smile, the poor child was struck with fear, and she ran off to her mother crying bucket loads of tears. It shattered Catal's self-belief that he looked decent enough. Either way, he thought things would ease up now that he returned the child, but when he tried to talk things out, claiming not to be an enemy of theirs, the old man elf straight up declared him an enemy who lost grip on the hostage, so everyone must attack him at once. All the elves shot arrows at poor guy Catal, who kept trying to voice his innocence. This experience made him think elves are more ignorant than even barbarians, which completely goes against how they are described to be gentle, righteous, and nature-loving races who seek peace. His image of elves changed after this incident, as they turned out to be a violent and savage race. He figures they must have been adapted to nature's law of survival of the fittest. Catal doesn't even have to dodge the arrows thanks to his robust and tough build, where elves thought he must be using some artifact. Catal was bored of this, so he clapped with quite a strength to calm down the elves. However, being an almighty barbarian, like his clap was going to be non-damaging. Catal's clap caused a little earthquake shaking the whole elf village, and everyone witnessing it quite literally started running to safety or casted barriers to survive. But nothing really worked as all the elves were sent flying through the air. Catal's clap didn't stop at just their village. It echoed with devastation throughout the whole forest. Once it subsided, the old man elf found himself shivering before the unexplainable destruction, and Catal noticed he might have misjudged his strength a bit there. Dude really destroyed their whole damn village and now acting like it was a mistake, which it really was, but like no one was going to believe that. A fire arrow was shot at him before anything else, and he didn't notice it until it almost struck him. A huge explosion occurred, and the old man elf seemed to have recognized that familiar fire arrow, since it was shot by none other than the elf queen of Leaf Tribe, Marsaria Hashian Carusia. It's good she got the title of queen, otherwise just taking her name would be a struggle. She questioned the old man about what happened here. The old man, completely disregarding what Catal said about not being an enemy, tells her it was this human bastard who attacked them. The elf queen just solidified Catal's newfound image of elves being violent by believing he was the sinner. Catal wished they would at least listen to his story. But the elf queen Marciara and the old man elf were more shocked about the fact that a human survived a direct hit from the queen's fire arrow. Finally, someone asked Catal if he's here to harm them, but before even getting an answer, she made her mind he's just another vile human. She pulled an arrow again while declaring her title of Queen of Leaf Tribe and vowing to make him pay for daring to covet them. At this point, Catal really doubts if he's speaking the same language because despite him speaking words of similar language to what she's speaking, she's just ignoring him like others. Or is it the humans and elves that have bad relations in this world? Well, it can't be helped now, since one thing he learned in White Snowfield is that if a wild beast doesn't listen, he just has to hit them until they do. Marciara released the arrow, this time even more powerful, containing the power of nature itself. But Catal didn't even blink as he punched straight through it and ultimately shattered the whole arrow along with the power it contained. He even mistakenly unleashed his own force towards her way, but even if he realized it, he couldn't stop it from hitting the place Marciara was standing at. The whole place suffered massive damage, and Marciara seems to have survived it, although taking a lot of damage in the process. Catal could swear he was holding back, but it still didn't seem enough, whereas Marciara realized one thing clearly: that her opponent is at least superhuman level. She couldn't understand why someone that powerful would be here, and since she can't deal with him, she offered everyone else to leave this place immediately, as she plans on using the last resort. All the elves were against it, but in front of their queen's orders, they had to give in and follow orders without any rebellion. Meanwhile, Marciera here declared at Catal's face he might be strong, but he'll never achieve his goal. My man just wanted to talk, but these stupid barbarians of an elf just wouldn't listen. While he hoped they could sort it out, Marciera was instead chanting to prepare for something even worse, as she performed a summoning ritual and called upon the fire spirit Fiego. Now this was something exciting to see for Catal, since he was bored of those horrifying and alien-looking creatures in White Snowfield. There were rarely some with fantasy-like appearance, but mostly were straight-up unpleasant. But the one before him now was undoubtedly a bull spirit ablaze in flames, which is just sick and literally the definition of fantasy. While he was all excited, Marciera here requested the fire spirit Fiego to annihilate the enemy before him. The fire spirit Fiego was quite egoistic and called her a bothersome contractor. Marciera silenced it and just asked it to do the job. Fiego, as she recalls, is one of those higher-level spirits with more pride and ego, and she took upon some heavy conditions to summon it. Fiego figures since there's no other way, he'll just finish this human before him and return. But the moment he looks properly at Catal, all he sees is a menace standing before him with a dangerous smirk on his face. He doubts if that thing is even human, but well, he was going to find out soon enough anyway. As the fire spirit kept staring at innocent Catal, Catal was all excited until the spirit marked him as a trespasser. Fiego declared he'll burn the human to ashes, which can't really be taken lightly by Catal, so he kind of lost his excitement. Fiego charged in to sway him away at once, but Catal didn't feel the need to dodge until they collided. The collision released such a powerful earth-shattering impact that the elf queen had to cover eyes before the shattering earth. However, once it calmed down, she witnessed the unexpected, as Catal had stopped Fiego's advance with just one bare hand of his. He was actually relieved this time his opponent was in beast form, so he won't have any qualms beating it to death. The elf queen felt shivers down her spine as Catal punched straight in the head of Spirit and split apart its whole body, even unleashing a powerful shockwave in a straight line, comparable to Saitama's one punch. The indisputable strength was enough to make everyone, including Marciera, submit before him at this point, and at her fallen knees, she hoped to make sense of how this was possible. Catal stood before her silently. She felt like she wouldn't survive this one. She begged him to at least spare her kin, but Catal made it clear just like earlier that he's not their enemy. Marciera was shocked by the unexpected claim, although Bro has been repeating the same thing since he came here. He explained the whole situation to her finally, which brought her shame, considering how quickly they judged him just because he looked like a human. She felt even worse for treating someone who returned their child with such harshness. And now that the misunderstanding is clear, Catal smiles, claiming it's fine since it makes sense they'd be this much hostile towards humans. She questions him if he's really not one of humans chasing them. Catal made it clear he never saw any elves before, since there weren't any back in White Snowfield. When Marciera heard Snowfield, she asked if by any chance he's the Ashton Barbarian of the Snowfield. Catal simply nodded. That's what outsiders refer to him. Marciera found it hard to believe since it was impossible for humans to survive there. It raises the worry if other humans can also pass through there. Catal can't say for sure, but he doesn't think it will be that easy for anyone to pass through Snowfield, since there are more dangerous beings in there contained by rules, and even powerful beings like dragons cannot break them. For some reason, he alone was able to escape through completing quests, which must have been nothing short of a rare exception. Catal inquired if her spirit's fine, since he technically split it in half back there. She assured him it's fine, since spirits just return to their realm. Now, to take responsibility for her rudeness, she asked Catal if there's anything he desires, to which he simply shows interest in forming a contract with a spirit. She doesn't think it would be possible, since there are very few among humans who qualify to form contracts with spirits. She can't confirm the rest, and suggests him to head to Elfo Sagrado, which is the place where their 11 Gif resides. It's the sacred land of all elves, and she believes he might be able to form a contract with spirits there. Catal wonders if a human like him could go to 11 Sanctuary. Marciera replies that would be impossible normally, but with her referral it might be possible. She decided to give him the location of that place, hoping he'll keep it to himself. She used magic to gather something in a crystal, while thinking if a corrupted human were to find Elfo Sagrado, it'll pose a great threat to them. Even so, she'd like to believe in Catal, so she asked him to take this crystal, which will guide him to Elfo Sagrado. Catal accepts the crystal with goodwill, and she warns him he'll be tested by their god once he arrives there. Although she's sure he'll pass the test and wished him luck for his journey. Catal was grateful for that. Then she finally introduced herself properly to him as the Queen of Leaf Tribe. Marciera Hashiane Carusia and Catal did the same. With things settled here, Catal moved on his journey and made long strides towards his next destination, the nearest human settlement from this place. My man traveled faster than a damn dragon with just strides, which was obviously visible to the guards on the wall of Gehenthra Kingdom's Barkan territory. They were all alarmed by the approaching menacing presence and informed all the other guards to stay on alert right away. Once the menacing presence fully arrived at the walls, the cause of it, Catal calmly stood before the guards on gate, who were hella scared by the way he arrived here. Catal greeted the guards with a calm expression, but they remained on alert, because no doubt this man here was the cause of those shaky earthquakes they were feeling just a bit ago. They immediately judged him by the looks of his ash-colored hair and a scar on his chest, recognizing him as the Ashton Barbarian of legends from Snowfield. As Catal approached them, the guards ordered him to stop, unless he wanted to be attacked. Catal calmly declared he's not their enemy, but the captain of guards found it hard to believe, and just asked what he wanted from them. Catal simply pointed at something behind them, and the captain of guards saw it pointed at the city walls. Catal claims he just wants to visit their territory, which didn't really sound like something an enemy would say. They sat him down in an interrogation room and asked what's his purpose of visiting. Catal simply claimed to be wanting to stay here for a while, for not sure how long. The captain asked him for his name, which wasn't anything hard, after which he asked if there's someone to confirm Catal's identity. Catal responded, "There's nobody like that," but when he recalled Milena, who gave him something like a pendant to show whenever he comes outside, Catal brought the same pendant outside and asked if it's enough for confirmation. The captain questioned, "What is that?" Catal explained it's the crest of Akasha family, which he received from a direct descendant. Now that the captain thinks of it, the Akasha family did pass through the snowfield a few years ago, after which they started gaining prominence from their achievements, especially after their family head was replaced a few years ago. Catal inquired if that's enough to confirm his identity then, but the captain wasn't completely convinced, since he can't really accept something from another kingdom for his identity. Although it'll be a bit helpful, allowing Catal to pass through on one condition. Catal was curious what kind of condition the captain responded it's to confirm that he's not dangerous. The condition was for Catal to be sent to clear a dungeon in a party of 3 more people who are trying to pass through the city gates, but don't have a way to verify their identities. Catal thought this condition was reasonable enough, so he accepted it. But the captain made one thing clear, that after they cleared the dungeon, he would ask Catal for all the information about what happened in their exploration. Catal realized the captain is trying to monitor people with uncertain identities through each other, and from that process he could also filter out suspicious fellows. It's quite a clever move, and the captain was surprised to see a barbarian really understood that much. Catal confirmed he is a barbarian, which kind of didn't make any sense, so the captain just took his case as an exception. That's enough for conversation, and next he guided Catal to the room with other fellows that will be part of the dungeon exploration party. The first guy was a self-proclaimed holy knight, Alessandro Tyrannus. The second guy was thief Kassan Hak, which was already bad combination to put together due to their backgrounds. Naturally, they disliked each other, and their arguments even lead Tyrannus to draw his blade at Kassan. Kassan didn't seem to be a pushover either, as he pointed his poisoned dagger back at Tyrannus, and after they started exchanging blows against each other, they were stopped by the third member of this party, a priest named Colossia Hayes. She wasn't sure about having to clear a dungeon with a bunch of blackheads, and they were currently waiting for one more member to join before they could start exploring the dungeon. Colossia wasn't sure about doing this, but right then, the last member of their party arrived, and the moment the last member, Catal, stepped in the room, his presence immediately scared the shit out of others. He happily asked others if they were his party members, but instead of answering, they believed they might be executed by this man before they even stepped foot in the dungeon. Catal was cheerful as always, and the captain of guards left everyone to introduce themselves, while he returned in a moment. Catal started with his introduction, and when he asked the next guy's name, Kassan hesitantly introduced himself in a weak voice. Tyrannus followed up with his introduction as Holy Knight, which made Catal wonder if Tyrannus could use holy powers. Tyrannus claims he's kind of unable to use them at the moment, and that aside, the last member Colossia also introduced herself, claiming to be a priest who worships the god of lies and deception, Haze. Catal noticed she didn't sound much confident in herself, so he asked if she's uncertain about her being a priest. Colossia couldn't help it, since the god she serves isn't very well regarded. Once the introductions are over, the captain of guards arrives and tells everyone to follow him. Catal and everyone else obediently follows after the captain, and once they arrive at the entrance of the dungeon, the captain fills them in. This is a 3-floor dungeon, and the monsters here are mostly undead. Catal was excited for his first dungeon exploration, while the captain told them their mission is to clear the dungeon and find the emblem. Without any delay, Catal asked the thief Kassan for what should be their strategy. Kassan was kind of startled, but since he can't ignore Catal, he respectfully called him Sir before speaking further. Catal corrected, "He can leave out Sir since they're companions," but the other two knew fully well it seemed necessary. Now, Kassan came up with a clear strategy considering their jobs, which will have Catal and the warrior Tyrannus in the front line, while he will check for traps, and the priestess Colossia will provide support from the rear. Catal liked the fantasy-like strategy, and declared they should dive right into the dungeon then. As they walked into the dungeon, the inside was darker than they imagined, and Thief Kassan didn't sense any traps or switches so far. Things seemed suspiciously ordinary, and suddenly he saw something and stopped others, telling them there's a monster ahead. Catal didn't sense any monster, though, so Kassan explained the bones lying there are actually skeletons that will rise and attack them if they get close enough to them. Kassan was pissed. As it turns out, this dungeon was kind of perfect to clear out bothersome outsiders, but Catal didn't mind much since he was more focused on observing the fantasy situation. Kassan explained that skeletons, despite looking weak, are quite strong monsters, who could move fine even with their limbs cut off. And since they're made of bones, their defense is naturally tough as well, raising the difficulty of this dungeon altogether to higher than usual ones. Kassan gave calls to the priestess to prepare spells, and Tyrannus to get in stance as well while he aimed for the openings during the fight. He warned others they will have to hit the skeleton's weak point, the neck, multiple times to break it and defeat them. With the sound strategy, they approached the skeleton, and just as expected, the skeleton raised and looked at them with hostility. Catal was amazed by watching a real skeleton before his eyes, while others were just as tense as they prepared to counter it. However, regardless of their strategy, Catal straight up prepared to aim for the neck of the skeleton, while the skeleton advanced with its blade pointed at him. Catal effortlessly smashed the skeleton's neck along with its whole head due to large hands, which left him with feeling it wasn't that tough. But for others who witnessed it, they were naturally overwhelmed by the unexplainable situation. Catal just smiled and praised Kassan. He was right about the skeleton's weak point being their necks, but Kassan doesn't think there's any point in explaining to that bastard how hard their neck is supposed to be. Skeletons are an opponent that can't be defeated with one strike, unless the person could command aura. Furthermore, skeletons are also strengthened by the dungeon's magic, so the only way to defeat a skeleton is to repeatedly hit their neck. But this man right here just smashed the skeleton's bones to ashes with just one blow, which just goes way beyond being just strong, almost to the point of questioning if he's even human. Catal, unaware of the difficulty, nonchalantly gives the call to keep going, and nobody could argue with him after what they just witnessed, so they quietly followed after. They just didn't want to die here, which would be good enough considering what they're traveling with. The next time Catal encountered a skeleton, he looked at it with some thoughts, as the skeleton seemed to be stronger than the previous one, considering it had a cape. Others were alarmed naturally, knowing the difficulty just raised, but Catal casually asked them for a favor to let him handle these skeletons here by himself, since he wants to check a couple of things. They couldn't argue against him at all, so they simply showed obedience, and Catal thanked them for their understanding. Next, Catal went there and looked patiently at the assembling skeleton preparing to attack. Others wish he could just hurry, but Catal seemed to be enjoying himself as he kept observing the way the undead skeleton moves. As the skeleton swung its sword at him, Catal simply stopped it with 2 fingers, then snapped the blade in 2. He was curious to see what it'll do now. The skeleton jumped back and aimed for his blind spot with the broken blade. Catal effortlessly dodged it and grabbed Skeleton's wrist, smirking and wondering what it'll do now. The skeleton tried to jump back, and Catal ended up breaking its wrist mistakenly by applying too much force on it. He and Skeleton both were confused for a bit, but the skeleton didn't fear him yet, and switched to wielding its blade with the left arm. Catal was impressed, and this time he chose to stop the skeleton by simply grabbing the left wrist and breaking it as well. The skeleton jumped back and next time charged at him with the sharp, pointy right arm's bone. Katal was having fun at Skeleton's desperate attempts with its intelligence, while his party members couldn't deny the fact he's a true barbarian, seeking pleasure from fighting and seeing his opponent struggle. Katal's mischievous face scared real humans here, as he dealt with the undead by removing its head from the main body. He wondered if it'll move now, since he didn't attack the neck, and when the answer was positive, the skeleton still moved, he found it interesting and just crushed the head to finish it. He apologized to others to keep them waiting, but like they will mind anything he does at this point, as long as he doesn't kill them. Katal led the group once again further in the dungeon, and after a while, the party came across stairs in the dungeon, which according to Kassan are the stairs to the second floor. They passed through the stairs and everyone was eventually tired except for Katal. Kassan hesitantly asked if they could take a short rest. Katal agreed with them, and Kassan used up his whole courage to ask for it. He was deeply relieved it worked, and Katal quietly rested at one spot, waiting for others to recover their stamina a bit. Eventually, he broke silence, claiming to have a question about the dungeon since he lacked a lot of knowledge. Out of fear, Colossia told him that's totally fine, and learning is a great attitude. Asking next, what is he curious about? Katal questioned how come despite the dungeon being so close to territory, there's never been problems with monsters attacking people. Colossia answered that dungeon monsters don't usually come outside, and even if there are some exceptions, those cases are handled by officials, soldiers, or superhumans. Kassan nodded and added that dungeons occur naturally. Sometimes they are caves, sometimes towers, and one thing's common, which is that most dungeons appear near places where a lot of people gather. Katal thinks it makes sense considering the dungeon they are in right now is a cave. Colossia mentions dungeons are always kept in check by the territory, and then people like them, outsiders or mercenaries, or sometimes even guards are made to deal with them. Katal found it interesting that dungeons don't appear within the territory, and aside from that, they also must have great rewards for a successful raid. Colossia states usually rewards are given or found after defeating the last boss in the dungeons, which sounds to Katal just like a game. He got one more question to ask. Who makes these dungeons? This one came out quite surprising, since all they know is dungeons occur naturally and aren't made by anyone. But to Katal, it seemed strange in too many ways, because first they appear where people are concentrated, as if people are meant to check this dungeon. Now that he mentioned it, they do appear around people and lure them with rewards, which makes it all seem too man-made to be a natural occurrence. Colossia never thought of it this way because it seemed too obvious, and the same thing went through others' minds. Kassan wondered how come a barbarian was questioning such a truth now, since all that's expected from a barbarian is ignorance, as they are believed to be cruel beings without blood or tears. And the fact Katal is this smart means he's not some normal barbarian. Now Katal brought everyone's attention and asked if they rested enough. Everyone's thoughts jumped back to reality. They were being led by this barbarian right now and needed to follow whatever he said. Katal continued their advance, and after traveling a bit further into the dungeon, they came across a treasure chest with a lock on it. Kassan told him he could take it if he unlocked it, but actually unlocking a treasure chest required a thief with proven skills for picking, if Kassan would have been skilled enough, though he wouldn't have come into a dungeon in the first place, so it's a shame he'll have to give up on this treasure chest. But the moment Katal asked him to unlock it, Kassan's whole reality shattered. Katal's reasoning was simple. Since Kassan's a thief, he can unlock this treasure chest, and Kassan didn't really want to turn down Katal, since he valued his life more. The more Katal looked at him with amazement, Kassan felt even more pressured, because reality is, he's not skilled enough to do so, but upsetting Katal would be the same as inviting death. Kassan was trying to come up with ways sneaking his way out of this, but the excitement on Katal's face looked too risky to disappoint, and just the possible consequences of it makes him pray to God. Kassan, trying to save his life, claimed with a straight face he'll give it a try. Katal was eager to witness it happening before his eyes, but Kassan was getting scared even more, knowing a failure would mean death, and honestly, he didn't think he'd survive. He tried his best to remember the times as a porter, when he witnessed another thief in the party unlocking a chest. Kassan could even recall his ancestors with this much focus, but right now he just wanted to make it out alive. Fortunately, after trying his best for a while, he heard a kachak sound of unlocking, and with a trembling body he told Katal, "It's finally opened now." He can't feel any luckier than this. Colossia also cheered for him, even though she knew only skilled thieves could unlock treasure chests. Katal was impressed by his work, but little did he know, Kassan was questioning his whole existence at this very moment, since he always prided himself on doing his best to survive, but now he just ended up pushing past his limits in the face of real death. Katal questioned how much is the treasure in the chest actually worth. Colossia estimated it to be enough for an average family to live luxuriously for a month. Katal was impressed by it and asked Kassan to organize the rewards. Kassan accepted the job and started looking at items, the first one being a luxurious glass. Kassan couldn't help but keep looking at it, until Katal called him out, and he jumped in fear. Katal asked him if he needed any help. Kassan anxiously skipped past all questions with the same old "I didn't reply," which only thieves do. Others weren't bothered much by it, and once they gathered all the treasure, they proceeded further in the dungeon and eventually came across another skeleton. This time there's a bunch of them at once, about 4, so Katal just chose to deal with 3 of them while leaving one to the other 3 of his party. He wanted them to also have some fun dealing with the last one. They can't back out of this one either, since they haven't fought at all till now. Katal approached the skeletons to activate them, which reminded Kassan how creepy things can get in a dungeon real quick. The skeletons were raised like usual, and this time, others couldn't. Simply keep watching like before. They became serious about the fight and engaged in battle, but a skeleton easily dodged Kassan's dagger. The others were about to ambush Kassan, but they got strangled at once by Katal, who took his share of 3 skeletons to deal with. Rest would be fighting against 1 skeleton, and Tyrannus stepped forward to tank the incoming attacks, while Kassan would launch sneaky attacks from the skeleton's side. The skeleton barely dodged his blade and took some damage. Colossia was almost done with her buff spell, and she activated it on Tyrannus, who swooped right in to land a clean hit to Skeleton's neck. It didn't break completely despite multiple attacks, and while all that was happening, Katal was already done with his side and enjoying the sight of proper party examples from games. He kept standing there to watch the whole show, as Tyrannus kept advancing for more attacks. The 3 of them know it all clear by now that the barbarian is testing them, so they can't afford to show any hint of weakness and excluded as much power and stamina they could to overwhelm the poor skeleton. Finally, they managed to defeat it after so much struggle. But even so, they didn't let it show no matter what. After seeing them battle, Katal was sure now the ones who came to Snowfield 5 years ago were surely tougher than these 3. After clearing this area, they advanced to the 3rd floor, where they confronted even more skeletons. But with Katal taking the lead, it was a piece of cake. And at last, they arrived at the dungeon's deepest chamber, the boss room, where they met a skeleton knight sitting at his throne. Colossia was the first one to express fear, as this thing shouldn't be in a place like this. Katal questioned how different this one was compared to others. She replied, "It's on a whole another level of strength. One should be at least knight level to fight it." She didn't think they could handle it, but when Katal asked what would happen if they turned back, she reasoned the guards would investigate to check if they made a reasonable decision. It usually gets resolved without any issues, so that means they don't really have to fight it. But Katal had something else in mind, and others could see it in his eyes. Katal straight up approached the skeleton knight and activated it without any fear. The skeleton knight stood firm with a long sword in hands, and Katal was interested in checking out just how strong that thing is. The skeleton knight took stance before attacking, and Colossia warned everyone of the incoming danger and quickly casted a barrier. The skeleton knight's attack was too powerful for her to block, so her barrier cracked in front of it, and Tyrannus followed up with shielding it next. The combination of both the barrier and shield barely managed to block one slash from Skeleton Knight, seeing which Katal was quite impressed, while Tyrannus came to the conclusion real quick that thing is just way too strong for them. The Skeleton Knight advanced towards them again, and this time, Katal simply observed its movements and punched straight through its guts, severing the Skeleton Knight's body in one punch and defeating it. The sight left others shocked enough to drop their eyeballs out of their eyes, while he clapped the dust off and asked if their work was done now. They didn't have to waste much time on their boss. And later on, Katal noticed another treasure chest in this room. He asked Kassan to unlock it, but this time Bro didn't give him any false hope, claiming it's impossible since it's protected by a high-level lock. Katal was disappointed at first, and Kassan had to admit they might have to give up on this chest. But Katal out of nowhere punched the treasure chest open like no big deal. Kassan was the most shocked one among them, as they saw the chest open in a second. Katal simply asked Kassan to handle the cleanup later. And while he did it, Kassan wondered if it was really that simple. Why did this bastard ask him to unlock it in the first place? With that, their dungeon exploration came to an end, and they were finally able to see the sunlight after a long time walking through darkness. Catal saw the dungeon they just cleared collapse on its own since it was cleared, and Cassan mentioned there was no secret room this time. So, Catal learned sometimes secret rooms do occur after dungeons as well, although very rarely. Cassan can't understand just what drives this barbarian, and in any case they went back to the captain of guards to report the dungeon clearance. When Captain asked how the dungeon was, Catal simply replied it was very satisfying, and now the captain mentioned he'll proceed with exit protocol by interrogating them one by one. Firstly, Colossia didn't report any major problems, and when she was asked if barbarians should be allowed to stay in territory, she replied it should be fine. The captain noticed she was being vague when it came to the barbarian, so he moved on to ask the same questions to the other two, and both of them didn't see him as someone who'll cause trouble. Captain learned the barbarian is monstrously strong, according to reports, but he didn't harm anyone, which means he really is different from normal barbarians. And when he interrogated Catal about the exploration, Catal praised his teammates for doing their best there. Captain found it unusual, since random people rarely praise their party members, and since he doesn't sense any dangerous intent, he authorized Catal and others to enter the territory, but if they were found causing any troubles, they'll be expelled immediately. He also paid them with dungeon clearance rewards, and Catal appreciated it very much. Catal didn't mind splitting the reward fairly with others, but they denied it like they never even went with him. Catal insisted since they did it as a party, and he wouldn't take any objections. The moment he said it, everyone felt compelled to go along, even when he asked them for a celebratory drink in a tavern. The three, even if they wanted to run away, couldn't possibly do so when it comes to Catal, and they just wish they could. Just go home with tears in their eyes. The captain of soldiers noticed them leaving with only one of them seemingly excited, and that aside, he also heard the reports of that barbarian one-shot a skeleton knight. Captain couldn't ignore this situation, since Catal was really the barbarian of legends, an anomalous being, and since that's the case, he should hurry up to report this to his lord. Later, at the castle of the lord of this territory of Barkan, the lord, Luke Barkan, allowed the captain of soldiers to come in, and the captain reported the appearance of that barbarian in their territory. Luke Barkan asked the soldier if he gave permission to that barbarian. The soldier assured he judged it wouldn't be a major issue. Luke didn't see a problem or a reason to report it separately, until the soldier remarked the strength of that barbarian itself is something that could be a problem one day. Luke was curious just how strong was this barbarian to make the captain of soldiers report it while sweating. The captain reported that according to those who witnessed his strength, they claimed he took down a skeleton knight in a single blow. This claim itself was shocking to Luke, since he knows Skeleton Knight is a monster that can't be handled by normal people, and to think it was dealt in one strike was surely by no means a small matter. And moreover, to think it is a barbarian, which is a race of simple-minded, uneducated beings who resort to violence to solve everything, made him worry a bit. He asked if this barbarian is a first-rate, but the captain replied vaguely it might be the case. Luke confirmed the possibility of this barbarian being even stronger can't be ruled out. It means a warrior of that caliber, a barbarian at that, will be roaming around his territory, which could cause a headache. He ordered the captain to summon him, which made him worry if Lord Barkan would be all right with that. Luke wanted to see for himself to make sure the existence of this barbarian won't put his territory at risk. Captain was worried it could be dangerous for Lord to meet him directly, but Luke Barkan was fine with it, since he had his own knight here just in case. Soldier was reminded Lord Barkan was well protected by a strong knight of his own, and when Luke asked his knight his opinion on the matter, the knight voiced it won't be an issue since it don't make a difference if a barbarian is strong or not, since all they got is brute strength with no brain. Thus he believes for a swordsman like him, who's trained directly by a great swordmaster, that barbarian won't be a match. Luke Barkan felt at ease and summoned the barbarian to speak with him directly. Meanwhile, Catal was having a celebration party with his party members, since they would be parting ways after this. But even though it's a celebration, he seems to be the only one enjoying it to the fullest, while others hardly took a sip from their drink in fear. Catal pointed out this place is good, since they have delicious food and a quiet atmosphere. But the others know fully well why the owner of this place didn't want to risk any half-witness in Catal's treatment. Catal then asked Tyrannus, "He's a paladin. What kind of holy powers he can use? He doesn't recall him using any during the dungeon raids." Tyrannus replied he's currently still in training, so he hasn't awakened his divine powers yet. Next he asked Colossia if there's any temple of her god nearby, but she didn't think so, since her god wasn't exactly a welcomed deity, since she was the god of lies and deception. She was a god shunned and rejected by the masses. Now, Colossia was quite curious about something herself, so she straight up asked Catal how strong he is exactly. This was something the other two also wanted to know, but Catal didn't exactly have a clue to that himself. He wasn't sure what rank he would be, and it hasn't been long since he left White Snowfield, so he's curious about it himself. He asked how strong a skeleton knight is, to which she replied that it would be around second rate, and one would have to be at least first rate to defeat one of them. Catal has a clue on what the second rate looks like. Then around the same time, the owner of the tavern hesitantly approached them to inform them his shop is about to close for the day. He was extremely careful since he's dealing with a barbarian, but the calm response from Catal was totally unexpected as he finished up the meal and left the place with others. Out of curiosity, he asked others if they had any plans, and this was exactly the moment they were all waiting for, a chance to run away. They claimed to be super busy, and Catal, being innocent, felt sad and wished he would see them again someday. But surely like hell they would want to meet him again in this life, and being able to leave him already feels like the start of their second life. Later, Catal got himself a room to spend the night, and that was the first time he got to lay down in bed ever since he came to this world. He's glad the innkeeper was really generous to give him a room late at night, and compared to a snowfield, this place feels like a paradise. Catal wonders what should be his next course of action, since he wants to experience more, to feel more, and go on some adventure like visiting the Elven Sanctuary, the Magic Tower, and even the Royal Capital sometime. With these wishes, he slept for tonight to have some undisturbed rest, unlike all those dangerous nights till now. Next morning, he woke up to his door being knocked several times by someone, and he wondered who it could be. When he opened the door, he saw the soldier's captain from earlier and asked what's the matter. The captain embraced himself before announcing that the Lord wants to see Catal in person. Catal wondered what reason could the lord of this territory possibly have to meet with him, and in any case, since it didn't seem trouble, he accepted it. He went in to change his clothes real quick and headed out right away with the captain, who seemed surprised since Catal accepted his request so easily. On the way, Catal witnessed great sights he couldn't see yesterday due to nighttime, and seeing it all located in the fantasy world just fascinates him. But his excitement and warm-hearted smiles scared the hell out of the captain, as he didn't know what's going on. But it seemed the best course of action to avoid eye contact the whole way. Soon, they arrived at the Lord's castle, and the captain informed Lord Barkin he brought the barbarian. Luke Barkin allowed him to come in, and he even greeted Catal with a firm introduction as the lord of this territory. Catal accepted the firm handshake, and even bowed down to show proper respect to the lord of territory. Luke Barkin felt like he saw everything in this world, since no one had ever seen a barbarian bowing his head before this. Barbarians never do it, because for them, strength is everything, and yet this one is following proper etiquette. Luke Barkin feels delighted, but he can't get swayed by just this one thing, because he has more urgent matters to attend to. He asked Catal to have a seat, and Catal was amazed by all the luxury stuff in this room, truly worthy of a lord's castle from fantasy. And what caught his eye more than anything else was the knight standing beside the Lord Barkin, which reminded him of times when he used to love playing night games. He never imagined he'd get to see a real knight, and his passionate gaze at the knight instead came out as killing intent from the knight's perspective. He couldn't let his guard down even for a moment when that barbarian is daring to emit such an aura in the Lord's presence. He kept a strong grip on the handle of his sword just in case, but before he could act upon instincts, Lord Barkin made it clear the reason he called Catal is simply because he wanted to confirm some things about him. Catal didn't mind at all and asked what he wanted to confirm. Firstly, where did he come from, which was simple enough to answer, and Catal honestly replied he came from the coldest place in the world. That vague answer was enough to confirm he came from White Snowfield, and if that's the case, he's truly the barbarian from Legends. Although Luke found it quite hard to believe, but Catal can't do anything about that, since it's his choice to trust or not. Luke then proposed another question, asking Catal how strong he is exactly. He wanted to know exactly how much of a threat Catal could be if he wanted to, but Catal simply replied he didn't know the standards of determining one's strength. In that case, Luke Barkin glanced over at his knight and suggested Catal having a spare with his knight here. He also ensured proper reward if he wins the match, and since it's a spar, it naturally piqued Catal's interest. Luke Barkin promised it won't be a serious match, although he trusts Catal would keep it within bounds. Catal smiled as he liked the offer for a spar against a knight of a fantasy world. To have such a chance to witness a knight's skills firsthand seems really great, thus he was looking forward to spar. However, on the other end of table, Luke Barkin believed a barbarian will be a barbarian after all, since he could see the excitement coming up Catal's face, remaining true to the barbaric nature of seeking and enjoying battles. Later, they arrived at an arena for the sparring match, and Lord Barkin was overseeing the match from his seat. His knight and Catal were standing opposite each other in the arena. Luke Barkin signaled the beginning of spar, while reminding both competitors not shedding any blood. The moment the bell rang, Lord's knight referred to Catal as a lowly barbarian, while remarking he was really fortunate to have the honor of witnessing his swordsmanship. Despite the mocking remark, Catal hoped to enjoy the battle, hearing which pissed off the knight, and he took his relaxed face as an insult. The knight resolved himself to win the battle with overwhelming difference in their skills, but even so, Catal seemed relaxed, while he observed the knight's movements as his blade seemed like it split into three as it almost made its way to his head. At first, Catal assumed it could be an illusion, but surprisingly enough, all three blades were real, although it was still easy to dodge them. He wonders if this is what fantasy swordsmanship is like, which as expected is truly awesome. Whereas the knight was getting the feeling that Catal was hardly managing to dodge his blade by hair's breadth. So, he leveled up his attacks a bit more, thinking it would be enough, but Catal was also tired of it, so he just snapped his blade with one flick. It happens too fast for the knight to process, but Catal didn't wait long and grabbed his armor with his bare hands. His fingers passed through the armor, making a real tight grip, followed by Catal throwing the knight off like a ball at the wall. The knight lost his consciousness the moment his body hit the wall, and this sight left the Lord Barkin shocked. Lord Barkin never thought he'd witness his knight to be defeated with such overwhelming difference, and from just one strike at that. His knight was first rank, so his defeat was definitely a big deal, and it just explains further that Catal there is truly as monstrous as the rumors said. And to think he would still keep his calm, Lord Barkin couldn't deny he wasn't a good guy. He announced the winner of the match, and from his observation it seems Catal is at least superhuman level. But given that he was still holding back during the spar, leaves him guessing just how little he knows about his strength despite the spar. A barbarian with such a strength could very well tip the balance of the world, so he felt the urgency to inform him, one of the few people with the title of Swordmaster. Later in his office, he's curious to see if that Swordmaster will take interest in Catal, and he should be arriving here around this time due to that work. Right then, he heard the voice of the very Swordmaster, asking if Luke was talking about his interest. Luke hastily looked back and found the Swordmaster standing right there. He calmed down his gasping breaths, while Kane was straight up work, asking what matter pressed him hard enough to call for him. Luke Barkin stood up to show proper respect to Swordmaster Kane, and greeted him properly with his title. However, Kane was more interested in getting straight to work, so Luke Barkin didn't waste any time and took Kane to his knight, who still seems to be suffering in pain. Luke asked the knight if he's feeling better, and the knight immediately raised his body a bit to apologize to his lord for losing. He was assured to be fine after a few days, but then Kane entered the room, claiming the knight should be apologizing to him since he lost, despite being his disciple. The knight was flustered to see his master here, while Kane observed the chest of knight, which didn't suffer a single wound. Kane had seen his armor before coming here, and the fact it was completely destroyed wouldn't have surprised him if the knight had died. However, to think despite facing such force he made out completely unscathed means that Barbarian is very skilled at showing restraint. Kane immediately concluded that Barbarian isn't mindless like others, and he also has incredibly precise control over his strength, easily surpassing the knight level. He confirmed himself that Barbarian is at least a superhuman level, and to think Kane the Swordmaster was saying it means Luke Barkin and the knight were mistaken in their judgments of the Barbarian before. Luke Barkin felt compelled to ask a question which might seem rude, but he wanted to know where that Barbarian stands compared to Master Kane. Kane replied that the Barbarian might be strong, but even so, he's a Swordmaster, so even superhuman-level strength alone won't be able to defeat him. Luke Barkin is relieved to hear that, but then Kane added that the Barbarian didn't seem to have used aura, yet he could wield such power. It's impossible by ordinary means, which means that must be the power he attained while living in that white snowfield. Luke Barkin found it hard to believe at first, but now he does. Kane is wondering if the legendary Barbarian is really a human who came from the white snowfield, or perhaps he could be a heteromorph, meaning a monster in the shape of a human. However, he quickly shrugged off this theory because if that Barbarian was a heteromorph, he wouldn't show consideration for humans at all. However, it still raises the question why now, of all times, did he come? And why from the white snowfield at that? Luke asked if there's something wrong. Master Kane denied it's nothing, and he'll set this matter for later, since he already has a pressing matter at hand, given by His Majesty the Emperor. Kane feels annoyed, as the Emperor really asks for strangest things. Kane assures there's nothing to worry about, and asks if that barbarian is still in this territory. Luke mentioned the barbarian did say he would stay, in which case the Swordmaster Kane was curious to check this barbarian out himself. Meanwhile, the soldier captain asked Ketal what he plans to do now. Ketal hasn't thought of it till now, and recalls the time after the duel when he received a reward for the duel. At that time, Lord guaranteed he won't interfere with Ketal's activities from now on. Ketal thought back then it would be nice to have an official identity so that every time he visits a new territory, he won't have to enter dungeons. The captain suggested if he wants an official identity, there are two ways. The first one is to have someone of high status become his sponsor and vouch for his identity. Or he could become a mercenary. In the latter method, if one builds up enough achievements as mercenary and gets recognized by the guild, their identity will be acknowledged. However, the captain knows that unless he reaches a certain level, one might as well be treated like an errand boy in the beginning, so he didn't want to suggest this method to a barbarian. Ketal, though, decided to pick the second method, since becoming a mercenary sounded really cool, and he would get to take on requests and slay monsters, which is the very essence of fantasy. Since he made up his mind, he asks where to become a mercenary. The captain simply answers the location for it would be the guild hall. Ketal tells him to guide him there, and the soldier doesn't mind doing it for him. Now, mercenaries in this world are very much like adventurers, who foam the world and take on requests, from small to big ones like handling dungeons or monsters. For the same reason, the bottom feeders in their ranks aren't treated any differently than pushovers, dumb idiots who don't know any manners. They keep fighting even amongst guild venues, and others would just bet on them for fun. In midst of all this, a blonde sighs, and a pink-head receptionist asks the blonde receptionist, Rosa, "How are new recruits doing?" She replied, "It's all just hopeless weirdos. One claims to be a holy knight, one's a thief, and the last one seems okay, but because of who she worships, no one really trusts her. That's just more of a work than less, even after getting new recruits, and she wished some decent guys would show up instead of dumb mercenaries. She wonders when a cool and handsome prince riding on a white horse will sway her away from this hell job." At the same time, Ketal entered the guild hall and she hopefully looked at him, only to be scared at the sight of a barbarian. Everyone else stopped what they were doing for the same reason, since the kind of ignorant race barbarian is here. Ketal simply tells the receptionist he's here to become mercenary. She feels scared and asks him with a weak voice, what's his purpose of becoming one? Ketal states there are various reasons, but the most important one is getting official status. She was worried, as she asked if that's okay with him, since it would require him to mount a considerable number of achievements. Ketal was fine with it and paid the registration fee of 5 silver coins, and soon enough his registration was completed, he got the mercenary badge. She told him it's very important, so he must never lose it. Ketal is feeling awesome to finally become a mercenary, and without any delay, he asks for what requests she got available right now. She was hesitant in showing the requests to him for some reason, and when Ketal looked at the list, he noticed these requests were meant for F-rank mercenaries, containing only daily chores as tasks, like her gathering, basement cleaning, sewer, and streets cleanup. She knows there's a good chance he'll lash out, since barbarians are known for their pride. She let him know beforehand he'll need to build a record before taking difficult requests. In that case, Ketal picked the first request to her surprise, which was a herb gathering one. She asked if he's sure. Ketal didn't mind at all, since it's also something that needs to be done. Now where he can find the herbs is all he wants to know. She told him the location and gave him a picture of it. Ketal told her he'll be back shortly, and seeing him go like that actually scared her even more, since a barbarian's unexpectedly chill after something like that. The other receptionist quickly came to check if Rosa was all right. On the other hand, Ketal made his way to the location of herbs and found them growing in a bunch around the forest. He thought they'd look strange for treating wounds, but well, that's a fantasy world for you. So he changed to his UV protection gear and began his first request as a mercenary. And about 1 hour later, he arrived back at the guild hall with a whole bag of herbs, asking if that would be enough. She wondered if he emptied a whole area and expected him to have destroyed a bunch of these. But surprisingly enough, all these herbs were in great condition, which is very rare considering even other mercenaries carelessly handle herbs and damage them. Ketal prides himself on his delicate touch. Rosa could see that and thanked him for his hard work, also handing over the reward of 1 silver coin. 1 silver coin was barely enough to buy the cheapest meal, but since it was Katal's first hard-earned money, it's quite touching for him. He made it known he's satisfied with it and would like to take another request right away. Rosa felt like she still hasn't seen everything in the world, since a barbarian's here happy with a little reward and is even asking for more requests. She wonders why he looks so happy, which means in the end even this new recruit is weird in his own way. Soon enough, Katal finished his third job of sewer cleaning, which surprised Rosa so much she wondered if barbarians like cleaning or something. Next one, he picks warehouse cleaning, so Katal didn't waste any time and arrived at the warehouse he's supposed to clean. When the owner saw him arrive and declare he'll clean the warehouse, she freaked out and thought he's here to destroy it instead. But she couldn't say no in front of a barbarian, so she let him do the job, and he was surprisingly good at cleaning and moving stuff. For next request, he cleaned the streets, although the dust scattering from his swings was too much for normal people to handle, but it solved on its own as he learned more control over his strength. In all this time he was working, someone was keeping an eye on Katal. It was none other than Swordmaster Kane, who can't make heads or tails out of why a barbarian is acting like that. He is sure that barbarian is at least superhuman level, a being whose strength could influence an entire kingdom if he wished so, and if he wants to be respected, he'll just need to show a little bit of his strength. And yet, despite being a barbarian, that man was choosing menial chores like these and even doing them with whole heart, which just pains Kane himself for some reason. He wonders just what is going on here, as he sees Katal enjoying small work. Next day, Katal wakes up after a long rest and glances at the rewards he earned till now by completing requests, and even though it was only 15 silver coins, Katal was very much pleased and wished to return again tomorrow for more requests. Now that it's his second day as mercenary, Katal wished to explore more of the town, but for some reason, all the kids cried when they saw him, while the adults feared him wherever he went. Katal saw a library on the way and decided to check it out, and when he entered the place, the librarian was shocked to see a barbarian come and ask if he could read books. And since it's a universal rule to not say no to a barbarian, she allowed him in, and Katal took some books and read them with delicate touch. The librarian was shocked and kept staring at him from afar, whereas the Swordmaster Kane was even more surprised to see a barbarian reading books. He begins thinking if the barbarians from White Snowfield could be different, or perhaps it's just this one which is a special case. Katal finished reading some books on the history of this world, and he even learned that the kingdom which Milena went off to sell the weapons lost to the Empire, making the whole Empire a force to be reckoned with. The Empire has now devoured half of the human world and still continues pushing forward aggressively, as if trying to swallow the whole world. This world domination plan was very much like fantasies. But well, that's enough for now, since he got an even more important thing at hand, to study the non-human races. This book was an interesting read, since everything in that book is from fantasies, which truly exists out there in this world. The books describe the world's richest cave, overflowing with rare ores like trash. Mantamia is known to be a dwarven tunnel. Pisarapia is named for the fairy village. There's even a sky city named Lagedmeria, where celestials reside. And lastly, there comes a sacred land where no one can reach, which is the sanctuary of all elves, Elfo Sagrado. No one knows its location, and rulers have tried every possible means to find it but failed. Katal feels amazing, since he knows how to get there, but then he realized there are more places like White Snowfield out there in the world. Places like that were called demonic realms, where human presence isn't welcomed and they are filled with uncanny and dangerous creatures. There are many demonic realms out there, among which top 5 of them are starting with the silent forest that dyes everything in stillness. Then comes the abyss that drags world into evil. Next is the deep sea where primates still breathe, the bottomless hole where nothing exists, and lastly, the White Snowfield itself. The terrifying beings deep inside these realms are called others, which thankfully cannot cross into the human world. Katal had to admit this world is very big, and he knows fully well how vast the White Field alone was since he's been there. He supposes that's all he can find here, so he gets up to head out. He thanks the librarian, and she almost jumps at being thanked by a barbarian. Katal then heads straight to the guild hall and asks what requests are available today. She shows him today's list of requests, and while he eagerly looks at it, Swordmaster Kane comes to conclude that the barbarian is really strange, so he guesses he'll have to meet him in person now. By nightfall, Katal had finished around a dozen requests today, and even through small ones, he had collected quite enough rewards. If he keeps up with this pace, it won't be long before he's acknowledged by the guild. However, things weren't going to be that simple, since Kane chose to confront him directly this time. Catal simply called him as the person who had been following him all day and asked what business he has with him. Cain was shocked, since he clearly hid his presence with aura, so one shouldn't be able to notice him even with sharp instincts. Catal simply covers his bag of money, since he thought this old man must be a bandit, which shattered the pride of the swordmaster, leaving him speechless. Catal didn't expect even a place with decent security to have bandits like this. And at this point, Cain wonders if Catal would even believe him if he were to reveal his identity. On top of all the damage, Catal commented that an old man having to resort to banditry must mean the economy isn't doing well. Although he figures if he catches the bandit here, it could be counted as a good achievement, bringing him closer to his goal. Cain was dumbfounded by what image he had in that barbarian's head. But since that's the case, he might as well use this chance to confront him and learn more about his strength. However, aside from the one step Catal took, Cain couldn't sense his presence at all, as if he vanished in thin air. The next moment he sensed Catal was when Catal was already standing right in front of him, and if he stayed like that even for a moment more, he'll be caught by him. Thus, Cain used his experienced footing technique to dodge, where Catal was impressed by the speed of the bandit. Cain was having a nightmare, as he almost got caught there, and if his reflexes were even a bit slower, Catal would have grabbed him by the neck. And what's more shocking is that he didn't even sense any aura coming from that barbarian. Catal was impressed by the speed of an old man, while Cain realized he can't half-ass it anymore, so he went all out from that moment. Catal was yet to become serious as well, and the moment he did, he grabbed the old man's right arm in an instant before he could even react. Catal even bent his arm to lock him, and it didn't just feel like being grabbed, but as if his arm was lodged into a boulder. Cain couldn't oppose Catal's strength at all, in which case he decided to release all of his power with full force. Catal saw the green light emerging from the old man, and suddenly the old man managed to free himself from his grasp. Catal thought bandits these days surely have all kinds of techniques, and at this point Cain just wished he would stop that nonsense, since he shed blood and sweat to achieve this level of mana manifestation. No way someone of that level would stoop to banditry, but Catal here seems to genuinely believe it. Cain was kind of surprised, since the mana he manifests could cut through steel from just a touch, but that barbarian over there doesn't even have a scratch on his body despite grabbing him. To endure it with his bare flesh is quite astonishing in itself, but Catal there is bored now and plans on finishing this. Cain instinctively grabbed the handle of his sword, but he didn't even get a chance to draw his blade, as Catal blocked it with his finger before he noticed. Cain was left damned by the unexplainable situation, and no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't even push back one finger of this barbarian. While Catal simply reaches out for him with another hand, it means it's game over for him now. Catal managed to capture the bandit, actually Swordmaster Cain, and planned getting him arrested for banditry. The moment he took the bandit to the guards captain, he was shocked by just what this barbarian did by catching the Swordmaster Cain and holding him like that. He thought it was possible Catal could have attacked the Swordmaster, but then Catal reported he caught this thief here, which left him speechless, since he knows the old man's no thief. Catal excitedly asked if it'll be counted as an achievement as a mercenary to catch this old man thief, but the situation was just too weird for the soldier to know how to react, and even if there was a misunderstanding, it just seemed impossible for a swordmaster like Cain to be captured by that barbarian. Cain is aware he's in a very humiliating situation, so he pretends to be unconscious the whole time, not knowing how to show face to others. The soldier's captain started off by clearing the misunderstanding, that the old man is actually the swordmaster of Gehenthra Kingdom. He formally bowed to show respect to Cain, while Catal was very much flustered when he found the truth. He found it hard to believe a thief would have a title like that, so he asked again if it's the truth, since this old man aimed for his silver coins like a thief. The captain confirmed again it truly is Swordmaster Cain, and he denied any possibility of a wizard using a disguise spell either. Catal shockingly realized it was the truth, and he didn't know what to do now. The captain decided to report the situation to Lord Barkin, and the moment Luke heard it, he was astonished to hear that even Master Cain lost to that barbarian. Catal was summoned later, and he immediately apologized to Cain for not listening to the whole story. Cain didn't mind it since he didn't say anything in the first place, and regardless, both sides ended up with regret. When Luke Barkin arrived at the room, he confirmed the situation with his own eyes, and even though he expected Master Cain to seek out a barbarian for a duel, he never expected him to lose, which means that a barbarian is even stronger than a swordmaster. Even though there are wide gaps in power among one superhuman to others, Swordmaster Cain is still a swordmaster despite being the lowest-ranked one, and to think Catal defeated him without struggling means he's an uncontrollable force altogether. Even the last piece of satisfaction he had is diminished now, and firstly, he sorted the situation by clearing the misunderstandings and leaving the two to have a proper conversation. Once he left, there was this silence between Catal and Cain. Cain could hardly speak anything after that humiliation, and the fact he was defeated so overwhelmingly hurt more than just wounding his pride. Finally, he broke the silence and introduced himself properly first, as Cain, the Swordmaster. Catal asked if Swordmaster is some family name. Cain replied it's actually a rank, since a human surname no longer holds meaning for superhumans. Catal asked if whatever he witnessed back then was the technique of a Swordmaster. Cain showed him the green light, asking if that's what he meant. Catal was amazed at the sight of it again, and since he thought it was a thief's technique earlier, he didn't pay much attention that time. But now that he knows it's a master's technique, it's truly fascinating. Cain explained it's one of manifestations of mysticism. This one's called aura. So what Catal sensed back then was aura, and he was eager to know how one can use it. Cain told him one needs to have control over mysticism first to manifest it, which made him wonder if mysticism is something like mana. Cain describes mysticism as mystical energy itself, which if used as aura makes one a swordsman, and if one handles it as mana, it makes them a mage. Catal gets that both mages and swordsmen can handle this thing called mysticism, in which case he would like to learn it as well. Cain is at a lack of words, as this barbarian is asking to be taught despite being stronger than him. He wanted to know the reason behind it. Catal simply claimed that despite being strong, he knows nothing about mysticism or swordsmanship. It's like blindly swinging a sword without any technique. Cain nods to his sound statement, and thinks it might have been different if only he could have drawn his sword back then since he's a swordmaster. Now, he plans on teaching Catal to at least restore his shattered pride a bit, thus he agreed to teach him. Catal also feels like Cain wouldn't be so weak, so he only felt it back then just because he couldn't draw his sword. Cain nods, but feels like that's more like an insult, and he only keeps adding up how a swordmaster could have only that much strength. Cain cursed him inside, while Catal kept being modest, claiming Cain might have won if he drew his blade. But Cain knew it wouldn't make any difference. And while Catal looked forward to training, Cain's self-esteem broke beyond his imagination, and he wondered if he'll be able to recover from it. Before regressing, Catal has actually spent some time learning basic swordsmanship, but since this is fantasy world, it will undoubtedly be different and tougher to grasp. However, when Cain began teaching him, he explained his swordsmanship is based on illusion, and asked Catal what he saw when he fought the knight, his disciple, earlier. Catal recalls his sword strikes split into 3, with all 3 of them being real. He now gets the concept behind it, and it turns out this style focuses more on technique than raw strength. Cain nods, claiming the one who masters techniques becomes a swordmaster, just like his own sword style here. He instilled aura into his sword, and Catal's eyes were dazzled from it. Cain felt superior and decided to show off some real moves to him, as he unleashed a long sword strike, which further split into 5. Catal closely observed the 5 of them hitting the wall and dealing equal damage. Cain mentions his sword style is the only one out there which can turn illusion into reality. Catal seems to have something to say about it, which makes Cain think he's going to be showered with compliments, but instead, Catal thinks he could do it as well. Cain puts a stop to it, asking what kind of nonsense he is spouting. Cain dedicated his entire life to sword, only to reach this level barely, which by no means is something that can be copied just by seeing it once. Catal figured it's faster to just show him, thus he drew his axe and took proper stance before swinging his blade real fast with raw strength. Cain couldn't believe his eyes, seeing just brute strength at play and unleashing the same splitting sword strike, but causing way more damage than Cain himself. Cain found himself unable to take eyes off that axe, which just copied his whole life's worth of training. Catal asked what he thought, and Cain couldn't deny what Catal did was any different than his sword style. However, it only contained overwhelming strength and speed, even though he was almost fooled by it. Cain told Catal he just swung too fast. There was no technique involved, but Catal thought it was fine since the result was similar, and swordsmanship is meant for real combat. So he thinks it should be good enough. Cain can't deny the argument as he's not quite wrong, but it's just frustrating to admit for an old man like him who spent all his life training it. Then he decided to show another technique, and this time it looked like 5 of him were swinging their blades at once. Catal was amazed by this one, while Kane finished swinging and aimed all the strikes at the wall, completely shattering his footing and the wall as well. He explained that body separation could only be attained by controlling aura to an absolute limit, so he asked Catal if he thought he could copy this. Catal walked a bit further and decided to give it a try, and he really swung his axe even faster than before while copying the movements he saw earlier. Kane was at a lack of words, as he saw this barbarian taking the same technique of his to extreme and creating a whole tornado of lethal strikes. Now he asked Kane again what he thinks, while Kane couldn't even think of anything, other than how he built everything over a lifetime, and yet this bastard ignorant barbarian copied his swordsmanship so easily and even took it to the next level. It was just so unbelievable for him to admit, and Catal realized Kane was more fragile mentally than he thought. Catal approaches him, praising his swordsmanship, while claiming that he was merely swinging an axe really fast, which isn't really proper swordsmanship. But everything Kane did was the real thing, and Catal doesn't think he can ever master mysticism at his level. Kane's broken pride recovered a bit from being acknowledged by Catal, and he recalls his style is still the only one to convert illusions into reality. So, it means his swordsmanship doesn't have any flaws. It's just that barbarian is just insane to make an illusion real without aura, which isn't achievable by humans at all. Out of nowhere, Catal asked Kane if he could teach him the true meaning of technique. Kane quickly came back to senses and apologized for getting a bit emotional there. Now he explained that to learn true technique, Catal must learn to control aura. But in order to control aura, he needs to have control over mysticism. No mage, swordsman, or witch can ever reach a high level without understanding the mysticism, and only those who believe in gods can bypass it. Catal realized divine powers are separate from this mysticism. Kane added, it's because their powers aren't tied to their personal abilities, but directly to God's. Catal kind of gets the explanation, then Kane adds, mystery is simply the mysterious power within oneself, and his use of it determines everything. So, in order to use aura, gain mana, or control spirits, Catal must have to comprehend this mystery. Next, Kane explained there are 5 stages to mystery, and at the first stage, one needs to be able to detect mystery. Catal asked if anyone could feel it. Kane defines if one is not gifted with it, they can't even sense it. And for those who can sense it, they call them third-rate. As Kane explained the ranking system in accordance with mystery, it reminded him of everything Milena explained in the past to him. Now, he understands it better, and Kane figures they should begin with the training for the first stage of mystery detection. He asked Catal to try feeling all things, as sensing mystic energy is like an awakening sense he never felt before. He needs to feel the breeze brushing past him, feel the touch of earth, perceive everything in the shifting wind, and try to sense distinct movements apart from it. Catal tried his best to sense everything, but he still could not feel anything, which came out as unexpected, since Kane thought someone of his strength would sense it easily. He knows it's not always the case, since even those without much strength are able to sense it, but it seems Catal might be an exception to that. He wonders if the uniqueness of White Snowfield comes to play here in some way, but like Catal would know anything, since he was surrounded by ignorant barbarians the whole time, and none of them could sense something like mystic energy. Kane stated it's not really easy to sense it in the first place, so to assist the process, he'll try to flow some power directly into him. Catal remembers it's one of those scenes where masters teach disciples by transferring their aura into them, and Kane admitted it's something like that. Catal, full of excitement, asked him to go ahead and do it, and Kane helped himself reach out for Catal's back. He told Catal to release all tension from his body and focus his senses inward, trying to feel the mana he channels into him. However, the moment he touches Catal's body, he wonders just what kind of body this is, since it's hard to believe a human's body could feel like solid rock. Catal asks Kane if everything's all right. Kane apologizes for getting lost in thoughts, and begins with the process right away. He started transferring aura into Catal's body, hoping he would find the path of mysticism within himself, but suddenly he realized there's not actually a mystical path inside his body, but it's also possible that he can't reach it because of his muscles. He tried repeating the process, but no matter how far he extended the aura, nothing could be touched or sensed in Catal's body. It's like swimming through a deep abyssal sea. It feels more like he's pressing through space that would crush him with pressure, so he comes to conclude it's no use. Catal was deeply disappointed by hearing that and asked, what does he mean by that? Does he have no talent for it or what? Kane explains it's not like that, but simply channeling aura into Katal's body isn't enough, and ultimately, if he wants to find mysticism, he'll have to locate the path within him and awaken the dormant power himself. Katal realized it could also mean he can't sense mysticism at all, but Kane can't confirm it, and claimed it would be more appropriate to say Katal's body is alien. To find someone's path to mysticism, aura must be channeled deep into the body, but Katal's body is just so deep and heavy that even aura couldn't reach properly within him. It's his first time seeing something like this. While Katal realizes it's difficult for even a swordmaster to do it, so he'll have an even harder time figuring it out himself. Thus it means he can't obtain mysticism. Kane gives him hope nothing is confirmed yet, so Katal might want to visit other swordmasters who are better at handling aura, or perhaps visit the magic tower. Either way, he's sorry that's all he could do for him. Katal thinks it's enough for now to know there's a possibility, and even so, he learned a lot from this. He thanked Kane for his help. Kane recalls every barbarian he met until now was uncontrollable, and they plundered others endlessly, desiring only drinks and violence. That's why barbarians are shunned by all people. But he has come to believe Katal is different. He asks him out of curiosity if he ever thought of settling in this kingdom, like pledging his loyalty to the kingdom and receiving a title. With his strength, he could easily earn a high rank, and Kane is willing to act as his sponsor. But Katal refused, since he does not desire to be bound by anything. Kane thought if they could get this barbarian into the royal palace, they could escape the Empire's domination, so he tried luring him in with a noble title. However, Katal just wanted to enjoy his life, and Kane can't continue pressing any further, and Katal thanked him for everything once again, claiming he won't forget this favor. Kane went silent in that moment, and later on, recalls how ridiculous it was of him to even think he could control Katal. He knows better than anyone that nobody can control him, since that barbarian acts solely on his own will. And because of the same reason, he knows Katal might be even more troublesome than other barbarians, since he's a barbarian from a demonic realm after all, and that too from the White Snowfield. At this point, he thinks it's just too ridiculous for the Emperor to even think of conquering demonic realms. He went and discussed it with Lord Barkin, while also mentioning that scouts are dying pointlessly, for no reason just because of the Emperor's wish. Kane states that the Emperor believes he's the second coming of the old Emperor who wished to dominate the world. Now Kane thinks it's all just a pipe dream, since they haven't even conquered all of human territory yet. Lord Barkin is worried his territory could fall under the war as well, and Kane doesn't think it's impossible, so it's better to remain aware in advance. He sighed, since the world's already strange enough, on top of which the Emperor is half mad as well. Lord Barkin is concerned the moment he hears that, and he asks if the rumors are true. Kane confirmed they are indeed true, as the demons have started to move. Dungeons are appearing at an abnormal rate, and there are even rumors that demons from demonic realms have already occupied some outward lands, posing great threat to humanity itself. And among all of this, he thinks the strangest thing is already here. He asks Barkin what he thinks. Luke replies he's not sure, and at the very least he's not hostile towards them for now. But he can't promise the same for the future. Meanwhile, Katal is walking down the roads, and people still seem to fear him as always, which makes him wonder if they are reacting like that because of his clothes. He thought it must be this animal hide vests scaring them away, which is a total misunderstanding on his part. In that case, he figures he should buy some civilized clothes for himself today. He walks into the first clothing store he finds, and the clothier welcomes him happily, until he finds himself standing before a scary barbarian, claiming he wants to buy some clothes. The clothier cries as he had to turn him down because they don't have anything of his size. Katal finds it unfortunate, then the clothier suggests he could make a custom outfit if given some time. Katal liked the idea and requested him to do so. The clothier promised he'll contact him once it's finished, but it scares him, thinking what if the barbarian doesn't like the finished product? He doubts he'll survive that, and thus he would make sure to do everything to avoid death. Katal simply heads for the assembly hall. On the way, he notices a shiny marble on the floor which piques his interest. He looks deeply into the pretty jewel and decides he'll ask about it at the assembly hall. Later, he asks the receptionist about the shiny marble, and Rosa doesn't think it's a jewel, and judging by the smooth surface, it seems someone polished or crafted it with precision. The longer she held it in her hands, the more she found herself lost in it. Katal quickly snaps once, waking her out of illusion. He asks if she's all right, since it seemed like her mind was drawn into the bead. Rosa didn't realize it herself, until she noticed the bead was radiating a strange energy. She wondered if they should have it appraised, but Katal wanted to figure it out himself, since it looks like fun. He then proceeds to ask about requests for. Today, Rosa showed him the request board, and Catal happily took them all without any complaints. By night, he earned himself a lot of money by doing small, odd jobs, but he still didn't find any clue on this marble. He was sure he saw Rosa drawn towards it, which means it has some kind of function, so Catal willingly looked at the marble for a while, until he suddenly heard a voice calling for him. Catal saw a dark path appearing in his mind, with a repetitive voice, "Coming to me." Catal decided to follow it, so he changed his clothes and set out on the path. He was annoyed by the repetitive voice, and after a while he reached an ominous cave, which seems to be the place the marble was calling him to. Catal thought it would be fun, unaware that something inhuman was waiting inside. He walked into the cave, looking for the one who called him. Catal didn't know he was being watched by the owner of this cave, who laughed at the sight of a stupid barbarian coming to his place, only to end up being an offering as part of his ritual to resurrect himself. The Lich recalls in past, there was a time of chaos when many kingdoms perished at the hands of an evil sorcerer who mastered at manipulating and stirring emotions. He controlled the minds of countless kings, waged wars, and dominated kingdoms, but his excessive evil doing eventually led to his exposure, and later on, he got subjugated by heroes. However, just before his death, he transferred his soul into a life vessel, thus becoming a Lich in the process. A Lich is a being who infuses their soul into a life vessel to achieve immortality until the vessel is broken. Now, this Lich was planning his resurrection, which demanded a great number of lives as sacrifice, so he settled near a territory and scattered mesmerizing beads to lure in sacrifices one by one. By offering sacrifices, he would create a monocore needed for resurrection and conquer the world once again. His plan was steadily heading toward success. That was until a barbarian arrived following his bead. The very presence of the barbarian itself was unusual here, since these beings don't normally come down from the north. He recalls placing special effects on the beads, so it only mesmerizes those unaware of mystic energy. Therefore, those who enter here by the beads don't pose a threat to him at all. That barbarian seemed to be just as ignorant, so if he doesn't appear mesmerized, it must be an illusion. He himself called the barbarian forward to the place where he was, and Catal eventually reached a gate which looked similar to the boss chamber of a dungeon. Inside, he met the Lich who called him here, and Catal recalls having seen Lich from the novels and games. Lich was ultimately the pinnacle of sorcerers, and it's usually a staple villain in fantasy worlds. He didn't expect to see even Lich for real in this world, while Lich was confused if this barbarian is even mesmerized by beads. Catal understood that Lich used these beads to bring people here. Lich doesn't feel any mystery energy from barbarian, so even though he's not under his spell, he doesn't seem to be dangerous. He comes to the conclusion that the barbarian might be carrying a mental defense artifact, and that, too, one with high enough grades that even he can't sense it. Catal denied, though he didn't have anything like it, but Lich refused to be fooled by a barbarian and now wants to crush him right here with skeletons. The skeletons raised by Lich seemed to be stronger than those from the dungeon, and they charged at him with more speed. However, Catal didn't really dislike the setting of a dungeon where a wicked Lich hides. And as the skeleton almost reached him, Catal simply crushed its head with his bare hands. The Lich was surprised by Barbarian's strength, and it made him reconsider his strategy a bit. The Lich then summoned more skeletons to win by numbers, but for Catal, these were mere playthings, so he smashed them one after another by punches and kicks, while the Lich was shocked, as he didn't expect him to be this powerful. Catal was done with the skeletons, but seeing they were all that Lich could summon was a bit disappointing. The Lich suffered emotional damage by his comment, so he decided to take revenge by causing the same pain to that barbarian. Lich conjured up magic and raised a skeleton knight this time, and Catal was familiar with it since he had fought one already in the past. He was expecting this skeleton knight to be stronger, since it was summoned by a Lich, so he observed its movements as the skeleton knight charged at him with his sword. Catal was excited to face this skeleton knight, and once it was within reach, he made a strong fist to check how sturdy it was. Catal went a little bit harder on this skeleton knight, but even this wasn't able to block it, so the skeleton knight was thrown a few meters away and smashed on the ground. Once the dust subsided, the skeleton knight still seemed to be fine, which impressed Catal a bit since it was the first one to survive one hit from him. The Lich then imbued more magic power into the skeleton knight and sent it dashing straight at Catal, aiming for his neck. The skeleton knight almost closed the distance between him and Catal, and it looked like he got him, but Catal simply punched it in the last moment and sent it flying back again with the same speed it came at him. Catal hasn't phased it all even once since the battle began, whereas Lich was losing his remaining life over the unexpected power of this barbarian. Catal simply walked past through the dust, asking if that was all. The Lich called him out, asking just what he was. He really doesn't sense any mysticism from Catal at all, and if he were using an artifact, he would have at least felt some mana by now. All these factors concluded this barbarian's own strength was at play this whole time. He doubted if it's even possible for anyone to deal with a skeleton knight with just brute force. Since the answer was obvious, he deemed Catal as a special barbarian and decided to deal with him by himself. The Lich declared barbarian should consider this an honor, and suddenly Catal's surroundings went dark, and nothing was visible around him. The Lich questioned him if he was scared, which he should be, since he dared intrude upon his sanctuary, and now he'll pay the price for it. Catal simply mentioned that Lich was the one to call him with his orb, and technically he wasn't wrong, so Lich couldn't argue against him. Even so, the Lich told him to shut his mouth, declaring he's the greatest sorcerer who once brought ruin to 5 kingdoms, the great Kartos Branura's Kesses. Catal is so done with the long-ass names in this world, and moving next, the Lich Kartos attacks him with a dark spell aimed at his head. Catal noticed this one attack seems unusual, as if it's alive and trying to gain control over him. It's a spell that manipulates human emotions and draws out their negative feelings and immobilizes them inside their mind, leaving them unable to do anything. This is a unique magic Kartos developed himself when he was alive, and everyone was powerless before this magic in the past. Now he wonders what Barbarian would do, since he seems to be getting sucked by his magic. He summoned skeletons to catch him while he's not moving. But little did he know, Catal was very much conscious and he kicked his skeleton out of the way, crushing its head with the ceiling of the dungeon. Kartos was shocked. No way a barbarian of all people broke his magic effect like it was no biggie, shattering his prideful mind control magic. Catal mocked the Lich for trying the same plain old tactic again by sending a skeleton, as if he wasn't even fazed by the mind control magic at all. This hurt Kartos' pride even further. His mind manipulation magic was based on taking advantage of humans' negative emotions, and even the strongest ones find it impossible to resist his magic, since in the end they are humans as well with negative feelings hidden somewhere in their heart. Catal was curious. Didn't this Lich know some magic like Fireball or Magic Missile, which pissed off Kartos, since those were low-tier magic he'd never rely on? This time, Kartos decided to go all out with his next dark magic spell, but Catal was enjoying the time of his life having the front seat of this fantasy villain's last resort. Once the chanting was finished, Kartos directed all of it towards Catal, believing this much should be enough to not just control, but kill him once and all. He was sure victory was his now, even though he had to suffer a heavy penalty for overdoing himself. To conjure up the last spell, he burned up everything, and this should be enough to deal with even superhumans. But to his surprise, Catal simply withstood all of that without feeling the need to dodge, after which he simply asked if that was all. The Lich Kartos can't deal with him anymore, since he already used his most powerful spell, and yet this guy survived it, even though it was strong enough to shatter the mind of a legendary hero. He wants to know just who this barbarian is, but Catal simply remarked those spells were weak and they didn't feel much at all. And if that's all he got, Catal wants to end this show here because he's bored now. The Lich Kartos went crazy, as he claimed he finally understands now that Catal must have come here knowing who he is. Catal doesn't know what this crazy skull is talking about, but Kartos is convinced that the reason that none of his attacks worked must have been due to backing of the Empire, and they must have already tracked him down much long ago. However, Kartos refused to go down easily and instead came back even stronger to take over the world. In the past, he once heard of something called Human Ranch, deep within the Empire, where countless specialized talents are raised, and that Barbarian must be a product of it. He must have been thoroughly prepared by the Empire with the sole purpose of killing him, the great Lich Kartos. But even so, Kartos plans on killing them all and overturn the Empire once again. Catal is sure now that Lich has gone insane, taking himself, and in the next minute, he sees Kartos bringing out his life vessel and transferring his soul forcefully to Catal's body. Catal felt nothing even though a Lich's soul was literally entering his body, and if this process were completed, Kartos would be able to control Catal's body unless he becomes a Lich again. Kartos didn't want to be picky anymore and thought he'd make do with a barbarian's body as he tried to gain full control over it. But unexpectedly, what Kartos found inside Catal's body was something he had never seen before, and instead of him consuming his mind, He was being consumed himself by Catal. He realized soon enough this barbarian wasn't involved with the Empire, and it was a grave mistake entering his body. Catal's body wasn't like anything the Empire could ever create, and soon enough, his mind started breaking away. These were the final words of the great Lich Kartos. And of course nobody heard it, even the guy who unconsciously consumed the Lich. In his eyes, the body of Lich suddenly fell to the ground like a broken toy, and even the dark murky aura from before, which was pretty cool, dispersed in thin air without doing anything. Catal was looking forward to what will happen, but in the end, nothing did, and he was left unimpressed by the Lich of this world. Either way, since the dungeon is cleared now, he looked around to see what could be taken as reward, starting with the Lich's staff. He noticed the shiny stone on it and wondered if he could use magic with it. He mistakenly broke the magic stone out of the staff and figured he shouldn't tell anyone about it, as he kept the stone in his pocket. Aside from the staff, he saw the other item possessed by Lich earlier, a vase, which might have served as his life vessel. Catal intended to have it appraised by Rosa later, and now that he gathered what seemed appropriate for a reward, he looked around, feeling like something's still off about this place. Catal noticed a weird magic circle on the wall ahead, which reminded him of the possibility of hidden rooms in the dungeons. He tried to poke the magic circle with his finger, and unexpectedly, the whole wall shattered into pieces, revealing what's behind it. Catal discovered there were more people in this hidden chamber, and all of these seemed to be offerings that Lich was preparing. Catal wondered just who these people were and where they came from. When he tried to wake up some of them, they remained absent-minded as if they're still under some spell. Catal thought what he should do with them now, the correct course of action would be to report it to the guild. He was sure once he explains everything to them, they'll probably send someone to take care of it. By morning, Catal arrived at the guild hall, and he didn't waste time reporting to Rosa that something's came up. She was puzzled at first, until he mentioned the orb he showed her yesterday, which he suggested belonging to some Lich. Rosa still recalls it, and thought it could have been a joke by him. But Catal assures it wasn't a joke, and he even brought the life vessel of that Lich as proof. He asked her to appraise it, and this time, she can't just ignore this matter as a joke anymore. She was shocked when she heard the whole story, and Catal added, "There are few people in that place." He considered bringing them back, but their souls seemed to be absent, so he left them untouched, hoping someone else from the guild could handle it better. Rosa recalls now that there are indeed frequent missing person reports recently, and to think a Lich was behind it was a very big matter. She asked Catal to wait here while she called someone right away, and soon enough, the first squad of soldiers' captains arrived in person, asking Catal what's about a Lich. Catal casually greeted the captain and assured him everything's been taken care of. It wasn't a big deal. Captain asked for all the details, and after he heard the name Kartos, he was shocked, making Catal curious if he knew of him. The captain exclaimed he surely does, because Kartos was a magician who overturned the world 100 years ago, and he created emotion manipulation magic, which was the foundation of all the chaos. To think such a being was here as a Lich was truly a big deal. But here this barbarian is claiming it wasn't all that impressive, since Kartos just self-destructed during the fight. Captain found it absurd for a mage who once threatened the whole world to just self-destruct like that. He demanded more explanation on the situation, but that's pretty much everything that happened, and Captain was at a loss for words, not being sure what to do. So he just went to report to Lord Barkin just as it is, and when Luke learned of the existence of a Lich right next to his territory, he was naturally shocked and asked twice to confirm if they're sure it was a Lich, not some other monster. The captain confirmed it was indeed a Lich according to testimony of rescued victims, and there's also an item that serves as proof, the life vessel of Lich. Luke knows how serious of a matter it is for a Lich to settle near a territory, enough for the Empire to dispatch investigators, and this all had to happen right when Cain is absent. The situation has become a headache for him, and knowing it can't be delayed, he asked soldiers to prepare to send a messenger to the kingdom. Luke remarks they were lucky this time, and the captain of soldiers agreed, because it's thanks to that barbarian who discovered the Lich and dealt with it. Otherwise their territory would have been the first to fall victim, and the fact Kartos was preparing for resurrection is something they can't just suppress. He plans on giving Catal a worthy reward for his achievement, though he wasn't sure if their territory could provide one. Next morning, one of the maids came running in an emergency to report to the Lord that the heretic inquisitor of the sun god, Miss Aquaz, had arrived in their territory. This was shocking news to him, and he didn't waste any time in attending Miss Aquaz. He doesn't understand why she has come here. He requested her to take a seat and formally welcomed her as Lord of Barcan territory. She was grateful for hospitality despite her sudden visit, then formally introduced herself as Aquaz, the heretic inquisitor of the sun god. She was the youngest one to hold that title and have countless achievements to her name, the greatest one of which was decapitating 7 warlocks who forged pacts with demons, and she once single-handedly stopped a large-scale ritual. She's undoubtedly the most formidable inquisitor of the sun god, and even the Empire yields to the sun god's order in her presence. Simply said, Aquaz wields power far beyond that of a mere lord, so to have someone like her visit them suddenly was indeed worrying. And when she asked Lord Barcan if there was trouble, he just replied it wasn't much of a trouble, and it's been resolved now. Lord Barcan was relieved, thinking she's not here for lich matter, but then she mentioned she's here to speak about the oracle. But first she would like to confirm what really happened in this territory. Luke sensed she knows a bit of what happened here, so it won't be good to hide anything. He told her the whole incident about the barbarian and the lich, leaving even her shocked, and when Luke mentioned the lich in question was possibly Kartos, she just felt the ground sliding from beneath her feet. She wanted to see some confirmation he was here, so Luke showed her the life vessel Lich Kartos. Since Aquaz had divine powers, she could easily tell it was the real deal. She grabbed her sun god pendant while pondering over just what in the world is happening here. She asked if that barbarian is still in the territory, since she'd like to meet with him. Luke agrees he is still here, while Aquaz wonders if it's even possible for a barbarian to defeat Kartos. Luke confirms it with his own words, adding that even Master Cain was defeated by him. She found it all extremely unexpected, and this turn of events means a powerful figure has emerged in the world. She wished to know which tribe he's from, but when Luke told her he's from the White Snowfield, she absolutely loses it, thinking how could a human like that emerge from a demonic realm like that? She thought perhaps that barbarian might be the reason she came here. Luke is confused by her words, while she expresses desire to meet this barbarian in person. Meanwhile, Catal was pondering over how he even uses this magic stone, thinking he might have to wait a while to ask some mages for help when he runs into some. He recalls something and figures it's about time he should head out, because earlier, the captain of soldiers came to invite him formally to meet the Inquisitor of the Sun God at the church. He requested Catal to show proper courtesy to her, and he assured it won't be an issue. Within time, Catal comes out of his room prepared to head out, and the captain soldier is still there waiting for a while so he could guide him the way. On the way, Catal is wondering if gods exist and bestow their powers directly on people from their church. What makes churches in fantasy worlds any different than normal worlds? He was excited to see it with his own eyes, and when they arrived at the Church of the Sun God, Catal was amazed by the historic looks of the place. The captain told him to continue walking, and soon someone from church would guide him. Catal thanked him for guiding him till here and walked into the church, observing the very traditional scriptures and items throughout the place. He was soon welcomed by nuns from the church, and they came here to escort him to Lady Aquaz's room. Catal simply followed them and soon was able to meet Aquaz himself. He properly introduced himself to her and thought inside she must be quite skilled to become a heretic inquisitor at such a young age. Aquaz got confused from his smile, while Catal simply asked her the reason to call for him. She told him it's because of the lich Kartos he defeated, since that sorcerer had committed great evils across the land in the past and eventually became a lich. But he wasn't an existence that could be stopped by anyone other than a hero, so she wants to know everything. Catal claims he has heard all that, and honestly repeats the same story of what happened there, of lich Kartos suddenly self-destructing. He can only tell her, even though she doesn't believe him, in which case she requests him if it would be okay for the sun god to observe this conversation. Catal asked, "What's that?" Aquaz explained. If he were to lie in the presence of God, a negative reaction would occur. Catal figured it's like a divine lie detector, and while she was worried if he'd agree to a proposal like that as a barbarian, Catal didn't seem to mind it, since he didn't want to miss a rare chance of experiencing the power of a god directly. He wanted to get started right away, surprising her a bit by his straightforwardness. She made sure to confirm if it doesn't bother him. Catal asked, why would it? Since the fact that God will be watching him was amazing. And why would that be uncomfortable for him, since he has nothing to hide and hasn't told a lie ever in his life? In that case, Aquaz started calling for God with a prayer, requesting the Almighty to observe the room and reveal any falsehoods if there are any. Suddenly, the eyes of God could be felt descending on the church, and even Catal could sense it very clearly. He could feel this enormous presence beyond the light, having strange emotions of curiosity as it looked at him. Aquaz was glad there's no negative reaction so far, in which case she proceeded with the questions, and Catal assured to answer them honestly. The two began talking about the process of Catal clearing that dungeon, and even though it all sounded the same as what he said before, there was still no negative reaction, which means he wasn't lying all along. She reached the conclusion that Kartos must have been in a weakened state, since he was preparing for resurrection. Otherwise, it wouldn't have been easy for a barbarian to have dealt with him. She concluded the whole situation as simple luck, and Catal inquired if her doubts are cleared now. Aquaz formally apologized for doubting him. He didn't mind at all since he enjoyed being under the god's observation. She then asked one last question, if he's truly from the White Snowfield. Catal confirmed he is indeed, and she couldn't deny any more that Catal is really the Ashen Barbarian from the legends. Unexpectedly, Catal also had a question, so he asked her straight away why she had come to this territory. She claims it was a personal business, hearing Catal ask out of suspicion if that personal business was to confirm whether Catal was an unholy being. She questioned what he meant by that. Catal simply reasons that all this feels like an overkill to call a god itself just to detect lies. She can't deny his claims, so she admitted he's right. Catal realized he was her objective from the beginning, but she denied that point, revealing that there was a divine revelation recently, and when she came to examine this territory, she thought he might be subject to it. But the result is clear, that he's not the concern, so she'd like to apologize for keeping her intentions hidden from him. Catal didn't mind, but he wanted to know what was the content of the revelation. Aquaz knows, normally one isn't supposed to reveal contents of divine revelation to anyone but trusted ones, but still, she decided to tell him the details of revelation, and Catal found himself more curious the more he heard it. Later on, Aquaz was visited by Lord Barkan. He noticed she seemed troubled. Aquaz mentioned that meeting the barbarian actually made things more complicated for her, since he is really from the White Snowfield. Lord Barkan wished it to be false, but in the end, it's an undeniable truth at this point after so many confirmations, even from the sun god. But he wanted to be careful about this matter because if this becomes known to the public, it'll surely cause a great deal of trouble, because many in the world seek to explore the White Snowfield, especially the Emperor. So, if the Emperor were to get air of Catal's existence, it'll undeniably bring more chaos. However, Aquaz, sensing his worries, guarantees he need not worry, since she'll handle information on Kartos herself and also keep the identity of the barbarian secret from the public. Luke asked out of curiosity if all barbarians from White Snowfield could be like him. She doesn't think that's the case, because if they were all like him, they would have already left the Snowfield and conquered the world. He can't deny that Catal is very well capable of that, and even if it's not him, many other barbarians simply want to spread violence since it's in their nature. But while they are all no good ignorant bunch, Catal was a special case, since along with unparalleled strength, he also possessed intelligence. This brings his attention to ask Aquaz about the current barbarian king, as he heard he also possesses both strength and intelligence. She claimed to have met the king of barbarians only once. She could confirm he was definitely different from the average barbarians as well. Luke was curious what will happen if those two meet, but she wouldn't prefer that, because it might raise the power of barbarians altogether, and if they were to become hostile, they could never laugh about it. Now, Luke asked her about the details of the revelation which demanded her to talk to that barbarian. Aquaz replied she needed to confirm something there. Luke asked her, "Confirm what exactly?" She replied it was to confirm whether Catal is pure human, or something merely pretending to be one. It made Luke even more curious about the contents of Revelation, so she chose to reveal the details of Revelation word to him, and as the Lord of Barkan territory, Luke couldn't be relaxed when he heard something like that. Later on, he summons Catal again. Catal, naturally, questions the purpose of this summon. Luke mentioned that as the Lord, he wanted to firstly thank him for saving his territory from Lich Kartos, because if Lich had acted at full strength, this small territory would have been wiped out in an instant. And the other reason is to apologize that the fact that Catal defeated Lich Kartos won't be made public. He knows this news, no matter how big or important, should never reach the Emperor, because he might act personally on this if he heard it. So, even if that means to ask this barbarian to forego the honor he rightfully deserves, he wanted to keep it this way, and Catal didn't really mind it since he's not after fame. Lord Barkan then brought out the reward he prepared for Catal, and Catal saw a leather bag placed in front of him. Luke told him it was no ordinary leather bag. He can look inside it to find out why. Catal was surprised when he looked inside it, and Luke explained, the bag can store up items enough to fill this whole room they are sitting in. Catal was impressed to see a magical artifact in person, moreover having it for himself. Luke mentioned Catal can also store items which seem larger than the bag itself, so Catal decided to test it out by putting his axe inside the leather bag just in case. He didn't feel like it'll fit inside, but unexpectedly the axe did go inside the bag, and he brought it out again since it seemed fun. Luke hoped he would like it, but Catal called liking it an understatement, as he loved this reward and promised to make good use of it. Luke was glad Catal liked it so much, which settles this matter. Then all that's left to worry about is the divine revelation. He wondered just what's happening in this remote territory of his, because first he heard from Cain about abominations of the demon realm coming out, and now even divine revelation says something troublesome, as the revelation exactly said that a great evil will descend here in this territory and spread throughout the world. Luke recalls his territory is composed of numerous small villages, because of which the villages would find it easy to communicate with each other periodically. Then one day, communication from one of the villages was suddenly cut off, and the people who went out to investigate never returned. The Lord has even tried sending some soldiers as well, but they did not return either. Only then he realized that something big was happening in that village. So the next day, Lord Barkin raised an urgent request at the guild to investigate the village that lost contact. Since Lord couldn't share all details, Rosa only knew this request was a simple one to just dispatch there to investigate, and the reward was quite large depending on the task. Catal liked the request and accepted the urgent request directly from Lord, and Rosa already guessed he'll accept it. Later on, everyone who was chosen to participate in this urgent request summoned at one place, and Catal greeted Colossia when he saw her there as well. It was normal for her to recognize it, but she was still surprised when she saw him wearing civil clothes this time, unlike the animal hide vests. Catal mentioned he had them newly tailored since the ones he wore in Snowfield were getting torn out. She noticed the design was quite unique, and Catal himself had it customized at the shop. Now, she asked him if he's also participating in this quest. Catal claimed he just had to accept it when the quest seemed so interesting. He then asks her where the others are, referring to Tyrannus and Kassan. She figures they must have refused the quest. Catal looked around at others who were chosen to participate, and there seemed to be fewer people than he expected. He expected more people to participate since the quest was a simple one with a large reward, but there were not even 10 people in total. Colossia told him this quest is actually a dangerous one. That's why the reward is too large. She mentioned there are also rumors that anyone including soldiers who went to that village never returned, which makes this quest more than it seems on surface. Colossia then adds there's another rumor going on, but before she could say it, it already came true, as just as rumors said, Aquaz, the heretic inquisitor of Sun God, was also participating in this quest. She recalls there aren't many willing to work alongside Aquaz, since she's known to be quite scary, and Colossia even fears if she'll try to split her head open. However, Catal assured that won't happen, since Aquaz is a polite and kind woman. Colossia was more shocked at the part where he sounded like he was acquainted with Lady Aquaz already, and Catal affirmed he's already friends with her. Colossia just can't wrap her head around the fact that a heretic inquisitor and a barbarian are friends. She thought the world ending tomorrow might have been more believable, while Catal simply went to greet Aquaz, although she especially pointed out having no memory of becoming friends with him. Catal laughed it off, saying it would still be great if they became friends starting now then. Aquaz then switched the topic, asking if Catal's friend over there is also a believer serving another god. When she learned she worshipped the god of lies and deception, Aquaz naturally seemed a bit confused, not just because of her god's nature, but also because the followers of that god were currently in a period of rest. So it's possible only those of high position were allowed to move. In any case, she didn't feel the need to speak further on it, since she didn't know the circumstances of her faith. Soon enough, the captain of the security squad also arrived, and Catal greeted him like any other day. The captain had a serious expression on his face, as he welcomed all who participated in this quest and announced they'll depart right away. On the way, everyone was cautious of their surroundings, while Catal felt like they were going on a raid instead of investigation. He then recalled the divine revelation when he saw Aquaz and asked if her presence means the time has come. She was a bit startled by the sudden question, then told him she's not sure about that, because God did not inform her of the exact time, and the village could have simply lost contact with them. Even though Catal focused on the fact there's still a possibility of it coming true, the possibility of the descent of a great evil, which wouldn't be bad to witness with his own eyes. After a while, they reached the village they were tasked to investigate, and the captain asked Aquaz if she sensed anything. She did not sense any presence, which made him wonder if everyone simply fled. He asked everyone to spread out and search for any traces, hoping there must be some clue, because the disappearance of almost 100 people is impossible at once. After everyone started searching around the village, they came across freshly prepared food and reported it back to the captain. At first, the captain thought it might have been food left behind by people, but when he heard the food still warm, the captain couldn't believe it, and went himself to find the freshly cooked food still releasing smoke over it. It was hard to believe, since they lost contact with everyone days ago. And now this discovery makes him wonder if there are any more traces. However, there don't seem to be any signs of anyone hiding here or leaving the village, which seems confusing, so he asked them to continue the search. Captain pondered over the reason why there's still signs of life, while there's no signs of people. When he asked others, they found similar evidence of people being here just a few moments ago, but there are still no signs of anyone. Captain turned to ask Lady Aquaz if she knew anything. Aquaz denied having found anything. Then lastly, the captain asked Catal if he had any idea. Catal didn't find any unusual traces either, but then he suggested, why don't they ask someone who might know the answer? Captain was shocked at this claim of his, and Catal asked him if they really did not notice someone else is here with them. The captain was confused by his claim, since he didn't notice when that woman in the common village people's outfit showed up, and just how long she had been standing there. The strange woman smiled, claiming it's interesting they found her out so easily when she was perfectly disguised. She asked Catal how did he notice her. Catal simply mentioned it would have been odd if he did not notice a new face among them. She claims that's not the case, saying normally people wouldn't even be able to perceive that fact. She pointed out even the heretic inquisitor of Sun God did not notice her at all before. Yet Catal here managed to do so without even having awakened mysticism. She smirked in an evil way, guessing he's quite unexpected. Suddenly, the captain warned everyone to back away from that woman. Then he quickly went over to ask Lady Aquaz about it. However, Aquaz was actually shocked, because even now, she couldn't sense or feel anything from that woman. It shocked everyone to see that even a heretic inquisitor from the most prominent holy order couldn't detect that presence, which means only one of two things, that she's either not an evil being, or she's an evil so powerful that she is impossible to detect. The strange woman was buzzed, as she wanted to follow them all the way to territory. But since she got busted here, she would instead have some fun with that barbarian. She revealed her true nature, and transformed back into her original form of demon with 2 horns on her head. The demon snapped once with fingers to summon a large quantity of demonic energy around her, and fully transformed with wings on her back as well. Everyone was shocked by the presence of a demonic being here, and the captain ordered everyone to retreat immediately. But the demon casted a barrier around the village, rendering them unable to leave this place, and declaring this village is her territory now. So no one can escape without her permission, and like hell she was going to release her prey. While everyone was scared and shocked by the demon's appearance, Catal asked Colossia if that's really a demon. Colossia confirmed it is, and one with a name at that, and started praying to her god to save her life. Catal patted her head to calm her, assuring she'll be fine since he's right by her side. Now, he asked her what it means for a demon to have a name. She explained that named demons are those counted among strongest of demons, also called true demons, and even the weakest demon with a name has power enough to shake a kingdom. Catal figures that one must be a true demon in that case. Colossia nods to that, adding that judging by the flames of that demon, she must be a satyr, a demon that last appeared centuries ago. Catal questioned if they really can't destroy this barrier. Colossia remarked, "It's impossible to leave a demon's territory unless they defeat it. There's no other way around." But when Catal tried poking a bit, he ended up making a small hole in the barrier. Catal felt like he shouldn't really let this be known to others, since it could cause a panic. So he just pretended to be looking around the barrier while acting weird. Meanwhile, Aquaz is pissed off at the demon who dares play tricks on her. A satyr was having fun, especially when she pranked everyone with fake traces of life left behind. Aquaz hated demons for how pathetic they were, and it's not like a satyr liked those worshipping gods either. Catal here was just enjoying the real fantasy movie scene coming true. Aquaz recalls that calling a named demon requires an enormous sacrifice, and just this village shouldn't have been enough, so it raises the question: now did a satyr descend into this world? In any case, Aquaz prepared to fight this demon while a satyr mocked her, calling her a mere god's dog, questioning if she really thinks her god will save her. A satyr did a favor on Aquaz and told her that this world is beginning to fracture, so this will no longer belong to only humans no matter what they do. Long ago, the legends told of times when gods and humans clashed against evil and emerged as victors, while the demons, the losers, were cast out of this world. A satyr claimed she can't count exactly how long she's been waiting for this day to come to wreak havoc upon this world. She declared her name Satyr, the demon of gravity, along with her purpose to wash away the shame of the past and drown this world in evil. Aquaz claimed this world only belongs to gods and humans, so all the evil must return to its rightful place in hell. Aquaz prayed to God to descend upon her and transformed into the battle mode with a golden armor and spear in her hands. Catal was enjoying the show, following the typical rule of no attacks during transformation. Once Aquaz was done with her transformation, she looked like a war god with her spear and golden armor, while the demon welcomed all the drama before she eventually destroyed it all like a dog's efforts. Aquaz calls her a wretch, as she charged in to strike the demon first, but a satyr wasn't so weak to need to avoid confronting the attack directly. The good and evil clashed against each other, releasing extremely powerful shockwaves around the village. Everyone covered their ears while these two collided, one attack after another. A satyr decided to get serious and summoned her weapon as well, to hunt the god's follower like a rebellious dog. Aquaz called out a satyr as the one barking here as the battle heated further. She swooped in to give a strong jab of spear to that demon, where a satyr simply stood there with her battle axe, then suddenly vanished out of Aquaz's sight, throwing her off balance and suddenly appearing right behind her. Aquaz barely managed to block with her shield, but the demon already predicted it, so she exerted more strength in her attacks with gravitational powers. Aquaz was trying her best to withstand the pressure, which was enough to shatter even the ground beneath her. Being defensive here wasn't definitely the right choice, as she was starting to get pushed back. Aquaz kept the demon occupied while chanting one of the verses of gods, which calls forth a sudden outburst of divine power, allowing her to push the demon back despite the disadvantageous situation. A satyr didn't expect to be pushed back by a mere human, and to think this heretic inquisitor could read scriptures at that age means humans haven't been fooling around all this time after all. Aquaz began reading another verse to call forth the divine light to burn all the wicked things. With another outburst of divine power, Aquaz closed in at the demon with faster speed, and once in range, unleashed a powerful strike with her spear. A satyr retreated a few meters back, but Aquaz wasn't going to give her time to recover at all. A satyr intersected her attack and pushed her back again. Aquaz was suffering from stamina, and she needed to end this battle quickly before she ran out of strength. But a satyr was aiming exactly for that, so she wasn't letting Aquaz take any breaths between the battle. The two kept releasing stronger divine and demonic energy with every collision, and their battle was changing the shape of this village as the rocks shattered and flew around in every direction. Everyone knew they would suffer the damage if they stayed anywhere near those two. But despite the intense battle between Aquaz and a satyr, Catal here was finding it magnificent instead. Colossia asked him if he couldn't help out Aquaz. Catal said it was possible. Why should he do that? He doesn't have a reason to interfere and ruin the fight between those two of good and evil sides, even though he'd like to try fighting the demon as well. She was convinced this barbarian is truly a lunatic, as he finds it more important to watch and enjoy this battle while that poor Aquaz is fighting for their lives. The battle was still going on, and both sides have eventually started showing signs of being worn out, but they still won't back down. A satyr could see that the girl over there is a good fighter, but she still has the upper hand in power. Aquaz suddenly showed up right on her face, striking her spear endlessly. A satyr blocked it with some difficulty, admitting she might be at a bigger disadvantage here just because of compatibility, since beings of evil can't oppose God in this world. She also wanted to avoid prolonging this battle, so desperate times called for desperate measures, as she decided to use any methods to gain advantage. A satyr suddenly changed the direction of her attacks, and Aquaz noticed that a wretched demon was scheming to attack one of the bystanders. Aquaz had to use another outburst of divine powers, which took a toll on her, just so she could make it in time to prevent the demon's attack from hurting one of the bystanders. As the battle just got closer to others, they felt a more powerful force crushing them in the air, and Aquaz was too occupied to do anything about it. She can't afford to fight with convenience here, considering she's fighting a demon who purely seeks pleasure from people's suffering. Asetiar liked this way of fighting more, since unfairness flows in their blood. This pissed off Aquaz even further, thus she ended up chanting the strongest verse of gods. She called forth the strongest outburst of divine powers she could, which released the divine energy in the whole atmosphere around her like a barrier. She called everyone to come inside this barrier real quick, and they obediently followed her without a question. The demon smirked, as situations like these were the most convenient ones, since that god's dog is basically wasting precious scriptures like that. Aquaz shouted at the demon to shut up, since she's not the one to talk about God. Asetiar was aiming to get on her nerves even more, so she'll eventually fight with pure rage. Asetiar and Aquaz clashed once again, then suddenly the demon flew past above Aquaz's head, telling her it was futile to make such noble sacrifices which won't be appreciated at all. Aquaz kept trying to block the demon's attacks from all angles, and if she were to miss blocking any one of them, she wasn't the only one who'd be hurt. Asetiar, remarked Aquaz, must have been driven by the greed for rewards that follows after defeating a demon, like rising her status and influence on God. Asetiar suggested if Aquaz really wants it all for herself, she just has to remove the barrier and focus on fighting alone, without anything restricting her. The demon was trying to lure her into removing the barrier around other people, while warning that if this keeps up, she'll eventually die here. She smirked as she summoned greater demonic energy and spread it throughout the whole village, which isn't any less troublesome than her direct attacks. Asetiar aimed to overwhelm Aquaz's capacity, and just when she found an opportunity, she instantly closed in on Aquaz alone with both her fists brimming with bursting demonic energy. For a moment, Aquaz showed a hint of fear, and it led the demon to have the upper hand for a bit, and she dealt some damage to Aquaz. Aquaz retreated back with minimal damage, but she was startled by the demon's relentless barrage of attacks heading straight for her. Aquaz found herself surrounded by a tornado of demonic energy, and before she could read another verse, Asetiar shut her mouth, making it clear this will be the end of her, as she smashed her head straight to the ground. Aquaz was unable to chant any verse, which gave Asetiar the perfect chance to deal the final blow. However, Aquaz somehow mustered some strength to raise the shield and hit the demon off herself. Asetiar knew Aquaz had lost her momentum, so she kept attacking her, knowing it'll be her loss if she gives this divine ball any chance. Eventually, the demon managed to break her shield, and she called forth the demonic chains to restrain her. Since Aquaz had suffered enough damage there, the barrier casted by her was cracked open, leaving everyone defenseless. One of them muttered they'll die at this rate, and the demon declared her plan to eat them all for dessert. But before anything else, she'd like to have a taste of this god's dog. She was just about to crunch her neck open, but was then stopped by Katal, telling her that's enough. Asetiar was shocked, because she didn't notice when he came so close, and she couldn't sense his presence at all. Katal didn't care if she did or not. He just throwed her away straight at the ground like garbage, then asked Aquaz if she's okay. Aquaz recalled now that she thinks about it. Katal is also a transcendent level fighter who defeated Swordmaster Cain, but even so, to think he could just throw away a demon like that wasn't normal. Asetiar, on the other hand, was ticked off being treated like a toy by an arrogant barbarian who interrupted her meal. Katal made it clear Aquaz is her friend, so he can't let her die. The demon changed his mind from turning that barbarian into her toy, but Katal didn't intend to become one in the first place. She smirked, thinking of finding out just how long he would keep that attitude on his face before eventually dying at her hands. Aquaz asked Katal to step back, since he cannot defeat a demon. Katal told her he's quite strong, but she explained it's not about being weak or strong, but instead only divine power could banish demons from this world. It's impossible through any other means. That's been a law since the beginning of this world. Moreover, this place is already marked as that demon's territory, so no way the demon was going to show any weaknesses here. But even though Katal learned that only God could oppose demons, he still didn't intend to let her fight in her current condition. Aquaz insisted on still doing it since she's the only one here who can, but seeing that tense expression on her face, Katal felt the need to give her a pat, praising her impressive willpower. He assured her it'll be all right, and she can leave it to him. Aquaz didn't just get patted by a barbarian, she did. Just the thought was crazy. And moreover, this barbarian here was heading to fight a demon simply because he wanted to try it once. Asetiar made it clear he can't beat her no matter what, but Katal doubts it unless he tests it himself. Asetiar liked how she'll get to see his eyes twist with pain real soon, so she used spatial magic out of nowhere to close in and land a surprise attack. Katal did get surprised a bit, while Aquaz blamed herself for putting his life in danger. The demon was happy as she believed things would go her way now, but all her expectations got smashed into pieces by just one good punch straight to her face, strong enough to smash her head off. Both the demon and Aquaz find it hard to comprehend what just happened. She can't believe her eyes, that he really smashed a demon's head with just his damn fist, while Katal stood like it wasn't any different than any other fight he had. However, the demon, to his surprise, emitted demonic energy from the headless body, eventually recovering her head completely. Katal figures the fight won't be boring after all, since the demon can regenerate just like that. She questioned just what he is. Katal simply replied he's an ordinary barbarian. But he was anything but ordinary, since it's just ridiculous smashing her head with just brute force. She gets a strange feeling from him, even though he doesn't seem to use any mysticism at all, in which case she thought that was a fluke and it won't happen twice. She was careful this time as she opened the spatial portal behind Katal this time, but even if she reached close to him again, Katal was able to keep up with her movements, and although he was a bit hesitant since she looks like human, he reminded himself she was a demon before punching straight through her body again, opening up a big hole in her torso. Asediar coughed out blood, not even realizing just when he made a hole through her body. She flew away from him, calling it impossible for the same thing to happen again. She recovered the damaged body again, and this fight doesn't seem to be going anywhere at this rate. Asediar realized it's impossible for her to defeat something that could literally punch a hole through her body anytime without even using any magic or aura. He seems to be enjoying this battle since the beginning, while she couldn't even touch him even once. Katal thought he should try more techniques, so he took one quick stride towards her, and she quickly summoned her weapon to block his fist. But he was too fast, totally inhumane, as he sneaked to her blind spot and threw another powerful punch straight at her head. Her head blown off just like that once again, and just like before, Katal saw her regenerate herself with demonic energy once again. Katal was appreciating demons to have that kind of setting, but he wondered if they have a core somewhere in their body, if not their head. At the same time, Asetiar knew she was totally like a plaything for this barbarian who's just facing her with raw strength alone. She thought he's mocking her, as if he didn't even need to use his real power against her. She refused to be played around like that, while Katal was clueless of what's going on in that demon's new head. She called him out and declared she's the demon of gravity, Asetiar, so he can't keep mocking her by only using his raw strength alone to deal with her. Katal remarked he's not really doing that, and she's not impressed at all either for him to consider using full strength. Asetiar has never been insulted so thoroughly in her lifespan of 1,000 years, and pissed off, she cursed him while lunging straight in for another attack filled with pure rage and bloodlust. Katal didn't faze despite her approaching him with her weapon, and when she swung the backside of her battle axe at him, he just stopped it with his hand, saying it's not bad since he could feel it's a little heavier than previous attacks. However, it still wasn't anywhere near enough, as he crushed her weapon with just a tight grip, following up with another punch crushing her head again. As her body flew mid-air, she thought to herself while regenerating again, "It's just humiliating to be pushed around like this since she is the demon of gravity." At full power, her attacks feel as if hit by a castle wall falling upon the target. But this guy not only blocked it with bare hands, but destroyed her weapon as well. Katal was getting bored of the same sight again and again, but just like she won't give up and keep attacking him, he'll do the same and crush her attacks with his bare fists, stronger than any other weapon or power in the world. He shattered her demonic energy in one blow and dealt damage to her whole body this time, causing another explosion. Aquaz is doubting what she's witnessing now, because Asetiar was an extremely feared demon hundreds of years ago, and yet a demon of that level was getting beaten like a dog with the bare fists of a barbarian. This just looks like something straight out of a dream, one that should never make sense in reality. But here, he was beating the demon repeatedly while her body kept healing. Katal has realized now she won't die, which means he'll need something more than simple physical force, but the demon's aware he lacks what he needs to finish her. Despite her being overwhelmed by Katal, Asetiar wasn't really scared, but she still wished to know just who he was. His answer remained the same, which sounded funny to her, and she wanted to go at it again, as she recovered and claimed she'd like to test something out. Katal was startled as she transformed her whole body into demonic energy and compressed it all in one place, as if she was taking a new form. Katal had no clue, while Aquaz had a bad feeling about this, because the demonic energy was pouring out like crazy from that concentration and destroying the surroundings. Soon, Asetiar's transformation was completed, and she warned the daring barbarian he's going to be pierced by her demonic spikes, each weighing in tons. As she aimed all the spikes at Katal, he was excited to see her full power. But Aquaz, being the sensible one, knew they needed to do something quickly because she can't let Katal fight further with simple physical force. She concentrated her divine energy while the demon smirked and shot all the thorns at Katal. Katal was ready to face them all with an axe, and they were easy to discard like clearing out mosquitoes coming for him. Asediar's jaw dropped as her trump card didn't work either, and she needed to run away from this menace of a barbarian. However, he was faster than she could react, so she won't be able to dodge the next attack, and at the same time, Aquaz casted one of God's verses and transferred divine energy into Katal's axe. Katal was mesmerized by his axe suddenly glowing in golden light. Aquaz asked him to kill that demon quickly. Katal wished to observe a bit more, but he guessed he won't have more chances of gaining divine power, so he strikes Asediar with his battle axe imbued with divine power, and this felt like cheating to her because he can't just suddenly start using divine power out of nowhere. She knew she was done for and admitted she lost, as the divine power pierced through her whole body and killed her at once. Her body slowly vanished from the world, while Katal thanked her once since he had fun fighting her. However, she claimed this wasn't the end, since she was simply being reverse-summoned back to hell. It's not like she gained nothing from this visit, since she now confirmed the existence of something like this barbarian here. She asked for his name, and he didn't think it's a big deal, so he just gave his name away. Aquaz was too late in stopping him, and the demon laughed as she shouted for all the beings in hell to listen and charge the name of barbarian Katal in hell. Aquaz was at a loss for words for this situation because Asediar just marked Katal as a target for all the demon beings from hell. From now on, Katal will always be eyed on by demons, Asediar exclaimed. He's theirs now and will soon be brought to hell someday. Katal did feel something entering his body, but the curse was simply absorbed by his subconscious mind like a prey, leaving him wondering on the surface. What was that? He asked the demon what she did just now, as he did feel like something entered his body. Asediar was shocked, because darkness should have filled his body by now, but he didn't seem to be affected at all, and he even distorted her vanishing body to ashes like no biggie. Aquaz and even Colossia were shocked by what they just witnessed, while Katal looked extremely relaxed as if he just woke up from a nap. He questioned Aquaz with a smile if their mission is completed now. After some time in Barkan territory, the news about the village that lost contact spread like a wildfire, and everyone was made aware that it was captured by a demon all this time. However, the Lord Barkan was losing his mind, because first it was a lich, and now the demon Asediar. One tragedy after another befalling his territory was giving him stress, and to think it was a named demon recorded in history books was just too much of a trial, if it's one. The rumors about the event spread quickly, although everyone thought it was the heretic inquisitor of Sun God who drove the demon away. Luke figured he needed to think about how to handle future matters since his territory was sure to be in chaos. But here, Katal is simply wondering why's everyone so noisy recently. Aquaz told him it's not a small matter that a demon appeared here, and she is sure the Lord is having a headache right around now too. She got up despite not having recovered fully. Katal asks if she's going away just like this before getting proper rest. She couldn't delay this matter and needed to report it back to the church as soon as possible. Katal figures he won't be able to stop her from doing her duty, so he stepped aside. Then she called out his name, to thank him for saving her life. Without his help, she would have become that demon's plaything. Katal told her thanks aren't necessary between friends, and he was just saving a friend's life there, although he feels the need to ask if they're really friends now. Aquaz was worried it would sound crazy, so she asked him if it's all right with him. Katal doesn't see a reason why they shouldn't be friends, hearing which she gives in, and he makes it clear there are no problems on his end either. She smiled for the first time in a while, since she has a friend now. Then Katal asked her something he's been curious about: why shouldn't one tell their names to demons? She replied it's because of the mark, which is like a curse by a demon, making the target a prey for all the demons out there in the world. Throughout history, those who received marks either received baptism from Lord to help their lives, or were eventually killed while being chased by demons. Katal asked her if he also has a mark on him. She replied that's not the case, and for some reason he still doesn't have a mark on him. However, his name will still be known to all the demons from hell. She told him not to worry too much since they won't be able to track his location. So, unless he encounters a demon again, she doesn't need to worry at all. Katal mentions how strange it was when he couldn't kill that demon with physical strength. Aquaz replied, that's just what demons are. She told a story that really long ago, Great lords summoned humans who were foolish and dull and acted on instincts. God didn't interfere in their world, but eventually the beings from hell became interested in them and started crossing dimensions to slaughter humans for fun. Eventually, God had to intervene and descend to the human world to drive out these demons, after which the humans built statues of their gods, who saved them. Humans have ever since kept living in peace. Until recently, for some reason, these demons have become able to interfere with the world.